OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
It is 7:30 on this Friday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Eoin and Adrian with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And it's a fairly stacked show, to say the least. We've got a crappy quiz, as always. We're going to have Niall Quinn with us at around 8:30. And we're going to have John Giles in just a moment. And then a last-minute guide to picking your Bundesliga team. But Adrian Barry, as ever, Mount Rushmore has managed to clamber its way to the top of the agenda because controversy is going to ensue later, I dare say.
Oh my God, has there been a more, you've been involved more of these than I have, but a more contentious one off air up to this point?
No, is the very definite answer to that. Explain to everybody what's been happening.
Did we nearly fall out yesterday? Was that a thing?
There was certainly a lot of passive aggression going on via WhatsApp. A couple of moments where you look at your phone and you're like, then you just put it down and you go back to looking at any screen that's not your phone for a while.
Not that long. So the County Down is up today, and we're going to talk to Conor, Deegan and Donal O'Neill in just a little bit to get a sense of exactly what direction they're going for County Down. It's a pretty stacked county. We're going to talk to Colin Murray as well. George Best came up, and certainly initially 24 hours ago, I was like, well, sure, why are we trying to shoehorn him into County Down? And then we do a little bit of digging, and a fair bit of digging, to be fair, to try and establish exactly where the guy's from. And it turns out he is actually from the County Down part of Belfast, which I can freely admit I had no idea even existed. The Craig Estate, it turns out, is in County Down. So he's totally legitimately a County Down Mount Rushmore. I mean, I'm going to say option. I'm not sure there's any option but to stick him up there.
Yeah, it's like having a fillet steak on the menu as opposed to chicken nuggets and opting for the chicken nuggets despite the fact that they're all the same price. That would be what it would be to ignore George Best in this context. We fell out not over George Best potentially being on the County Down Mount Rushmore. Of course he has to make the County Down Mount Rushmore. He probably makes the Ireland's Mount Rushmore as an island. What we fell out over was, my point was that when we get to the Antrim Mount Rushmore at some point, what if somebody from Antrim is like George Best is ours? And as a County Antrim person, I really identify with my fellow semi-Antrim person, George Best, and therefore he is on my Mount Rushmore. My point is that we can have duplicity in this. We can have Páidí O'Shea in the Kerry Mount Rushmore, and you can take him for the Westmeath Mount Rushmore if you want, Adrian. Same with George Best. If you want, he is one of the greats. If he has to be on two counties, then so be it.
Now I know you're stretching your argument. When you say I can have Páidí O'Shea in the Westmeath Mount Rushmore, you're going back on 2 years of wisdom on. So I know you're definitely stretching your argument for that. It's a strange one. Like, it's not. It's ideally, you'd like to know from the man himself sort of who he identifies with, or if he identifies with either. I suppose the thing, and there's a possibility that it's in the latter camp there. The Craig Estate, where he grew up and spent his time before he went to Manchester, is in County Down. So the County Antrim thing is actually only associated with our lack of understanding of where the guy is from, and having always assumed, and it's true, he's from Belfast, but not knowing about the County Down aspect of it. Like, if somebody comes on and makes the case, somebody from Antrim comes on and makes the case that, he represented us on the highest stage, blah, 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 blah. My view is he needs to go on the County Down one. We need to make sure of that for a start. But he's not from County Antrim. That's the difficulty I have.
Emma just made a very valid point that Tommy Rooney has a back garden that exists in Cavan despite being a Meath man, and if there was somebody from Cavan to pick him in their Mount Rushmore, who would we be to argue? My point is that people from County Antrim know better than you or I know, and maybe they see George Best as somebody who was really important to the people of Belfast as Antrim people and as Down people, and for that reason he can go on both Mount Rushmores. That's my point in summation. I agree. But by the way that I judge counties, he is from County Down, no question. That is where he is from. Not by how I judge counties, that is a fact. He was born and he grew up in County Down. But if somebody from Antrim, from the Antrim side of Belfast came along and was like, as a Belfast person, I really feel like George Best is one of my own, and as a County Antrim Mount Rushmore, I don't feel that we can have it without him. I actually don't think I would be able to argue against that, and that is where we got into our spat yesterday, I think it's fair to say, but you're having none of that.
I think that like the Tommy example, which would be like a Kevin Kilbane extension, is kind of what we're saying here. Like it's about a question of identity, right? Who do you identify with? For the lads, there's the for Kevin, for example, there is obviously that tension in terms of the identification aspect of, I'm from Mayo, obviously my family moved to the UK, so there's all that grey area, right? And he's here obviously to tell us exactly how he feels about all that. But with the George Best one, we've no sense of any of that other than he's actually just from County Down. So it's my view on it now is that actually somebody from County Antrim suggesting that he go on that Mount Rushmore is just a bit of a land grab, like an illegitimate land grab. We are operating in the absence of George Best himself. Anything of him on the record saying, I am a county... Like, let's say we had George Best saying, I'm a County Down man.
Yeah.
What would you feel then?
Well, obviously it's down all the way then, but we don't have that for sure. But if because it's we're in the hypothetical. But if that existed and somebody from County Antrim still came on and said, well, listen, regardless of that, he did represent us at the highest level and was a great ambassador for us. Put him on. Sorry, that's what I need to say. Like, the hypothetical here isn't so much to do with the fact that George Best perhaps maybe he has committed to one county or the other. The hypothetical here is we haven't actually got the Antrim's Mount Rushmore yet, and I think this is actually an argument we should be having when it gets to the Antrim Rushmore. And then the question of whether or not it is a land grab or whether or not there is a legitimate claim to George Best because of what he did for sports fans in Belfast and on the Antrim side of Belfast as well. That is a complicated question. That is the huge hypothetical, and that is perhaps where the argument lies. Don't get me wrong, if Antrim's selectors, I don't know who we've got yet, come on and are like, we accept that George Best is a County Down man, then this argument is over. You win. I will wave the white flag. I'm just trying to stick up for the County Antrim selector in advance in case we get to that. But there's plenty more coming on this this morning on OTB AM. We've got Colin Murray joining us at around 8 o'clock this morning. Conor, Deegan and Donal O'Neill then will be our main selectors. But let's get us into the first piece this morning. An unbelievable John Giles segment last night, because he was going through his all-time 11 made up of international players he encountered from outside Ireland and Britain, and it is quite the list. Have a look.
So far, we've Dino's off in goal, to back four of Carlos Alberto, Bertie Vogts, Franz Beckenbauer and Daniel Passarella. John, as always with these things, we're tight in time, so we'll tear through some of these. You've gone for a two-man midfield.
Two-man midfield, Nathan, because we're overloaded up front. So I've gone for Roberto Revellino from Brazil and Michel Platini from France.
You've obviously, over the last few weeks, gone through a whole host of unbelievably talented central midfielders.
Yes.
Where does Platini fit in around that sort of list? Was he more that number 10 role, or could he do a bit more than that?
Well, he could score his fair amount of goals, but mostly a deep line player who could be a brilliant distributor of the ball, Nathan. And he was the main influence on the emergence of France at that particular time to become one of the major teams in Europe. He was excellent. He brilliant technique, great distributor of the ball, scored his fair amount of goals from midfield. But he was a midfield player, a midfield schemer, as they used to call it in my day.
Yeah. Revellino, obviously a part of that 1970 team that you went and saw in Mexico as well, and people remember him probably from the moustache as much as anything else. As a central midfielder, why is he in your team?
Well, he was a goal scorer. You don't need to say somebody's a lovely, sweet left foot. He was brilliant on his left side. He could go past players, Nathan, but he had a deadly, deadly left foot for a midfield player. If he beat you, and he was getting a shot in. Actually, in the match I played against him in Brazil prior to a World Cup, he scored a goal like that. He beat somebody, got on his left foot and hit it from about 25, 30 yards, giving the goalkeeper no chance. And he like most Brazilians, control, no problem. Really, really good. Real top-class player.
Not too many holding midfielders in this side. Revellino and Michel Platini as the two midfielders, and you've gone for four attackers. And like the short list of players, we'll touch on some of them when you pick your four that you could have gone for, and this is quite frankly ridiculous. Which four have you gone with?
I've gone with Johan Cruyff.
Yeah.
I've gone with Diego Maradona.
Not bad.
Alfredo Di Stefano.
Right.
And Ferenc Puskas.
Yeah, that's not a bad front four there, John.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
They do a job.
And that's without the ones I couldn't put in, Nathan,
Gerd Muller.
We've got Uwe Seeler. I've got Francisco Hento. People wouldn't maybe played in the great.
Won 6 European Cups with Madrid.
Yeah. He won, I think he won 5 of them with them. Johan Cruyff, Mario Kempes, Gerd Müller, Jairzinho from Brazil, the right winger that played in that particular. Brilliant. It's who to leave out. Be honest, Nathan. You know, these were all great players.
You saw a very, very young Maradona. I think he came on the 2 times you played Argentina in those late 70s with that League of Ireland selection, and a year later in Dublin. He came on for fleeting appearances towards the end of matches. Did you have any sense then that he was going to go on and become arguably the greatest player there's ever been?
Well, he came on for a late spell in the match in Argentina, but in Dublin he came on at half time actually.
Right.
And you could see then, he was a couple of years older or whatever it was at that time. Actually, he got a ball on his left foot and hit the crossbar with it. I think we got a no-score draw with them. But you could tell then, at this stage, I mean, this fellow was a genius. Genius. I mean, he was. It's very hard to say it, Nathan, but what he had, I don't know if anybody saw the documentary recently on him. Like, he's well up there with me with being the best ever.
And as a sort of
I'm including all the top players in that now, whether it be modern players. Because one thing he had playing, he could really beat players, Nathan. He could dribble, he could go past players. Now, Messi is a great player, and Ronaldo was the great modern players, but they don't beat players the way this fella could beat them. And there's nothing better than somebody who can beat the opposition, Nathan. Do you know what I mean? Now,
what was it? Go on then. Talk a bit more about that. About when you talk about beating a player different to what someone like Messi would do.
Well, Messi beats them, but he doesn't go past them in a way that this fellow then Maradona went past them, Nathan. You know, when it's in the tight area, he can beat. But I think the first thing that Maradona had when he got the ball was, I'm going to take these on. Now, it's hard to describe it without showing it on video. Now, these fellas I'm talking about, Messi and Ronaldo and Puskas, and so these are the best players in the world. And I probably, on talking about it, probably shouldn't have mentioned that. But that's where I feel with Maradona.
Right.
That he had something that the others didn't have, which was going past players as well as he did, which, in other words, to make goals on his own. Messi is the next best at it, doing it in a certain way. Because, but he wouldn't be going one-on-one and taking them on and beating them the way Maradona did. But don't get me wrong. I mean, Messi and all these were great players.
Yeah,
great players.
We must come back, and we have plenty of time on Thursdays, and we might do an evening on Maradona. Yeah. But I do want to talk about Alfredo Di Stefano and Ferenc Puskas, because I don't think there's many people who could bring together a list like this. And when did you play against the two of them?
I played against them at Manchester United. I think it was in 1957 that Manchester United played them in the semi-final of what was then the European Cup, and Madrid beat them. So there was some connection between them. And then in 58, we had the Munich air disaster, and I think it was about 1959 onwards. They had a friendly match every year.
Okay.
Right? So I played against them at Old Trafford, and then I played against them when we played in Madrid. And actually, we won the 2 matches. They were only friendly matches, but Di Stefano and Puskas played in the 2 matches.
Their record is obviously incredible in that Di Stefano scored in each of the 5 finals for Real Madrid. Puskas scores 4 in one, 3 in another. 2 of the all-time greats, again, that we probably don't have a huge amount of footage of. What's your memory of them, of actually playing against them? Because I'm sure growing up you would have heard so much about them. Did they live up to everything you had heard about and expected?
Oh yeah. Actually, looking back at my career, or most lads' career, one of the great things, the most enjoyable things, Nathan, was playing against players like that you'd see in play. I mean, Puskas played at Wembley against England when England were supposed to be the first foreign team to beat them, apart from us, of course, where they beat England 6-3 at Wembley, and Puskas, I think, was playing in that particular match. That was 1953. Well, I was only about 12 at that time, 13 at that time, and Puskas, and we saw a bit of Di Stefano playing as well. But to be on the pitch with them was, like I found in my career, looking back, to be playing against these guys who were idols of mine, to be actually on the same pitch with them, Nathan, was incredible. And they didn't let me down as far as players were concerned. Puskas, stocky guy, scored about 1,000 goals in 1,000 matches. Left foot, you've never seen a left foot. I've never seen a left foot like him. Stocky guy, had enough pace, though, to make a space and getting a shot in from 20, 30, 40 yards out, Nathan. He was deadly. And Di Stefano would have been running around more covering the pitch more. But again, he was a right-footed player who combined brilliantly. They combined brilliantly with each other, and they both scored tons of goals, But they were a great combination. Di Stefano played in the first 5 and scored in every final he played in the first. They won the first 5 finals ever. Real Madrid at that time, and Di Stefano played in the 5 of them and scored in all 5 of the matches.
You were brilliant. You were still a very young man when those games were happening. There must have been a real pinch yourself. You're living the dream going up against Puskás and Di Stefano in the same game. Yeah, well,
as I said, I idolised them from a distance. You know, it was one of the great things as a football, for me anyway, I think most kids, that you're playing against, even apart from those 2 lads, in league matches. I remember playing against Newcastle and a lad called Jimmy Schooler. Most lads wouldn't. He was a great Scottish player. Playing, and Bobby Mitchell, the outside left, Newcastle, who played in 3 cup finals, and that. To be playing against these guys was incredible. It's what I actually did dream about when I was a kid. So playing against Puskás and Di Stefano in particular, Nathan, was huge. They were only friendly matches, but actually we won the 2 matches. But to be on the same pitch as these guys was a great honour, and they were absolutely. Well, we're still talking about them today.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people haven't seen them, but I think I said to you today, Nathan, if anybody listening gets a chance to see one of the old matches, particularly the match at Hampden Park in 1960, where they won 7-3 against Eintracht
Frankfurt, yeah.
Yeah, if they could watch that. I think one of them scored 4 and the other scored 3 in the match to win 7. So they were great. They were great to watch. They were heroes of mine. And to play against them was a privilege.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, unfortunately, John, so we don't have time to talk about Johan Cruyff, but I know he was there, and one of the times you went up, it was probably one of the great nights when Leeds beat Barcelona to reach the European Cup final in 1975. So we're going to be chatting about Don Revie over the next few weeks, so we might talk a bit more about Cruyff and that sort of period then, but Johan Cruyff very much part of that. John, it's Sum 11. We look forward to talking to you next week. Mind yourself.
Thanks, Nathan, and you.
You're welcome back. That is John Giles there on Thursday Night Football in conversation with Nathan Murphy. An unbelievable 11. Of all the 11s that Giles has picked over the last few weeks, I think it's fair to say his international footballing 11 is just out of this world entirely. That front 4 especially, as Nathan mentioned in that piece, absolutely incredible. You can get the full piece back on youtube.com/off the ball. He goes into more detail, of course, about that back 4 and the goalkeeper. Right, so later on, Conor Deegan and Donal O'Neill will pick the down Mount Rushmore. This could be possibly the sleeper county. I don't think a lot of us realised just how stacked this county was before we started doing our research. They've obviously got world-conquering footballers, golfers, All-Ireland winning sides, Ireland's top Formula 1 driver, athletics is covered, racing, of course, as well. A couple of great stories there. So we've drafted in some extra help from top-down broadcaster Colin Murray. Okay, so County Down is next up in our Mount Rushmore series, and I'm delighted to say that one of the county's finest sons is with us to chat through the contenders for the county. Colin Murray, you're very welcome. How are things?
Lovely to join. I am taking this way too seriously. Thank you very much.
That's what we expect. People kind of get into this looking at it in a trivial manner, and then they start to look at the contenders, and then they realise, oh God, this is actually serious business. And even from the outside looking in, I think there's a lot of people we've kind of parsed through over the past 24 hours or so and thought to ourselves, right, County Down is a real job.
Well, also even you have to just go to like, where's it going to go? You know, even though it's obviously not going to go anywhere because it's not real. But in my head, there's been arguments between communities. Do you know what I mean? It's been like marching season all over again. Do you know what I mean? But I'm going to say Strangford Lough would be a good area, I think. But I mean, you could put it in the side of the mountains of Moore and stop people walking up it in the bad weather. But
Slieve Donard is down, is it?
You could do that. You could just carve out Slieve Donard, you know. And there's a lot of good places around there, cheap B&Bs. A few amusements, decent beach. So on the day of unveiling, we'll have a good day. And I know one person from there, so I'd have somewhere to stay. But you know,
these are the most important factors. Who are you putting up there?
This is where the rows have broken out. Well, no, it was interesting because I think we'd all agree, right? I think you could have 100 people judge this. Because I always think never have more than 3 people judge anything. By the way, sounds quite threatening, that doesn't it? Sounds quite mafia-like, doesn't it? But I never have more than 3 people because you just get someone that's just being contrary, somebody, a devil's advocate. Get rid of all those people. 3 people's enough. But I think if you had 100 people or 1,000 people, so George Best is there, right? There's no argument. Yeah, he's on the Northern Ireland Mount Rushmore first picture, first carving. Right, so he's there. That's it. He's on the Irish Rushmore, right? So
he is. Right. We've had rows, Colin, today about where exactly. The fact that he's from County Down was brand new news to me today.
He's on the borderline. So there's a few of them are quite on the borderline that you have to look at and say, should you be allowed to count them? Because again, as I said, took this too seriously, and there are a few that you have to go, where exactly were you? There's a really obvious one for that. QPR legend, Alan McDonald. He's from Lisburn, which is half in County Antrim and half in County Down. So therefore, you run the risk of maybe you could just, if we were to pick him, maybe he just gets a side profile. But Bestie's there, right? Because you can't not. Yeah, he goes up, and he's definitely County Down. So he's the Craigie estate, in East Belfast. So he comfortably, that is listed as County Down. The whole estate. I know his house. I know where he grew up. So I can say he's definitely County Down. So you're right. If you're in East Belfast and you're in the down part, unless you know intricately the areas, you could easily go, well, hold on a second, is that definitely County Down? Mm-hmm. Because whoever drew County Down was drunk. So, yeah, he's got to go there. And I think for that same reason, Rory McIlroy's up there without even questioning it. I think if you look within his sport, within his world, 4 majors, world number 1, and he's safely from County Down.
What's the crack with Rory? Colin, like we've so much conversation about, look, he's an absolute banker. There's no getting away from it. And again, like when you talk about an all-island, Mount Rushmore, maybe at some point you'd probably mention 2 names that it'd be hard to get away from either of them. Like the perception of Rory south of the border, let's say, is sometimes can be a little bit frosty. Like, what's the view? He's done a lot for the north, obviously over the years. What's the view of him?
I don't really know him. I don't really know him. Whereas like somebody like Carl Frampton, I would know well, in that you'd sort of see him in the same places, but I don't really know him. I mean,
is he widely loved? Like that's the thing.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think he's grown up in public, which is never that easy. Like, I wouldn't have wanted someone my love life in my late teens splashed around the world. I wouldn't want it in a local newspaper, let alone anything else. Do you know what I mean? So he's done a lot of that, having to grow up in public. And golf's one of those sports. Let's be honest, the money's great and all that, but what a life that is. Do you know what I mean? It's a very sheltered, sort of exclusive life, sort of pulled away. The money comes quite quick, and the sponsorship deals and all that stuff. I guess generally. I mean, I remember when I went to see. Was it the major he has, the American major he hasn't won, whatever one that is it he hasn't won the
Masters?
He hasn't won the Masters, so whatever I can't remember. It was one of the two Americans, so it was either the PGA or that or whatever, right? And Frampton was fighting in New York that night, the night he beat Santa Cruz, and me and my brother had went to New York to see Frampton fight. And there was a backstage bar, and it was a lot of good crack actually. Loads of people in it drinking, and he was there, and he came over, and because I was sitting having a beer with Michael O'Neill, drinking with Michael O'Neill. There's not a surprise, and he was there, and Christine Blakely was there, and she brought Frank Lampard as her +1. It was one of those type of things. My brother was loving it because he'd never been in it. He was like, yeah, it's great, and he came over, and it was the Saturday, of course, and he hadn't made the cut. And my brother's intro to him was, "How did you get here so fast after playing your third round?" The worst thing you could say to Goffey, he was like, no, mate, sorry. My brother's like, "No, really, seriously? How did you get here, Rory? I mean, you had to play 18 holes this morning and then get it." And I was like, "Oh, this is such a Father Jack, Father Ted, Father Dougal moment." Like, and he kept going on. He went back about 4 times until Rory went, "Actually, I got knocked out." It was just dead awkward. Didn't make the cut. But yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's not like, I suppose in a way, there's certain sports connect in a different way. Golf isn't necessarily one of those ones you're ripping your shirt off and smashing beer cans off your head, is it really? But we bat above our weight, don't we? Our Irish golfers bat above their weight. I was at the Open in Portrush. I had a day up there and that was brilliant. Like, But
he's obviously brought a lot of tournaments there, and he's doing remarkable things. You're going one football, and I'm not sure either of those are hugely arguable. One way or the other. One football, one golfer. Where are you headed next?
I'd say 3 of Northern Ireland's greatest 5 footballers are from County Down, and this is where you run into problems. So, Pat Jennings is County Down. The man who should never have been a footballer. What an amazing story. I mean, that was injuries to Newrytown footballers. If there hadn't been goalkeepers at Newrytown dropping like flies, goalkeeper goes, reserve goalkeeper goes, youth keeper goes, and all of a sudden they're like, "We don't have any goalkeepers in this wee club." Wonder what that Gaelic football player did.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he should never have. His love was Gaelic, as is the case with a lot of really good goalkeepers and some footballers. Niall Quinn's one, isn't he? But not listed as well. That's why he was always good to go into goal. But it's hard to ignore what Pat Jennings achieved in his career. We're going to have to consider him. But you're saying, and also as well, just for the fact for his whole career, he's managed to keep, even in this age of he is now, the comb-backed Weetabix haircut. There's nothing like his hair in real life. What have you seen? What has your job afforded you to see? People think you're going to say, "Oh, I saw the last game at Wembley Stadium," or I saw Northern Ireland qualify for the Euros. No. Pat Jennings' hair up close is. Maybe his hair should just be on Mount Rushmore.
Oh, it'd be beautiful. It would be beautiful carving.
A back profile. Loads of moss. You could just put loads of moss on the back of it.
A living, breathing mullet.
But again, look, he says unbelievable a lot. That's what I love about him. No matter what you say to him. Well, talk to me about that brilliant night in '85 when you qualified for the World Cup. He'll go, "Unbelievable." And if you say to him, "It's a bit rain outside today, isn't it, Pat?" "Unbelievable." So you get the same answer for both. But the other one's a man who back in the day won the poll for Spurs' greatest ever player, Danny Blanchflower. He was born in Bloomfield. That is plumb guaranteed County Down. So that one, when I went through because I went through loads of footballers, clicked the names, just checking, is he Antrim? Where's he? Yeah. Right, he's out, he's up there. That one's, and then, that jumped out. I mean, the Spurs fans voted him their greatest ever player, captain, won all silverware, won European silverware, won domestic silverware. I mean, what do you say? So there's I'd say 3 of the best 5 Northern Ireland footballers are from Down. So we're going to have a wee think about that. And is that QPR I can see over your shoulder there, by the way?
It is, but it's not actually a football program. It's Brian McGuigan Pedrosa.
Right. Oh, fantastic.
On there, yeah. Go on. You're going to hit us about a QPR footballer, are you?
No, well, obviously, I could talk about that fight all night. I think it's the first boxing match I remember properly. It was 85 was such a big year. You had Dennis Taylor winning the World Championship. You had Barry McGuigan winning in the boxing, and you had Northern Ireland qualifying for the World Cup. So you're going, that's my life sorted. It's going to be like this. It's going to be like this for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great place! And then you're sitting there, you realise actually qualifying. That's about it. Well, I wonder how many Irish world champion boxers have we had since McGuigan? I must look that up, but it's not going to be a large number, is it?
No.
Professional Irish world champion boxers. I'm thinking off the top of my head, I can only think of 4. So, yeah, it'd be a good one to look up. Anyway, others. So they're the footballers you have to think about. David Healy's from Killylegs. Let's throw that in as another footballer. 95 caps, hat-trick against Spain, and of course scored against England. But he was the Robert Johnson in Northern Ireland. Do you know what I mean? He signed his soul to the devil. He went to the banks of the Lagan. He met the devil and he signed his soul away for 2 years and was just unplayable. But so I don't know if you great moments, right? Rather than I'm not being cruel. Rather than a great footballer, great moments.
Yeah.
Alan McDonald, you've got to consider him, but he's from the border. That's my only worry. But in terms of legends go, nothing quite like QPR. There's a great moment when Northern Ireland get a draw at Wembley in '85 to qualify for the '86 World Cup. 0-0, glorious stuff. And they interview him side of pitch. It's a very good clip for everyone to watch on YouTube. And the reporter says something like, "Well, Alan, it's been a great night here for Northern Ireland. Well done to you." And he just goes, "If anybody says this is a fix, come see me." Brilliant. Up until that stage, nobody thought it was a fix. Thank you for that. Now everybody thinks it's a fix. It's great. It's one of the best interviews.
What are you talking about? Let's look into
it. I know. Eddie Irvine, I'll throw him in the mix because, but really, do you deserve to be carved into the mountain just because you can break a speed limit? I'm not sure. He's from Newtonards, Conleg, I think is where he grew up. And my mate Paul, back in the day when we were all young, he was the first one to drive. He had a Ford something, and he was coming just past the shopping centre in Newtonards, where you're going a straight road into Belfast. And as he went round the roundabout and went on the bottom of the dual carriageway, he looked over to his right, and there was Eddie Irvine in a Ferrari, and my mate revved his Ford and raced Eddie Irvine up this road, which lasted about 3 seconds. So he's one to think of.
Part of the difficulty, Colin, I think, is that and your football credentials are well known, but the part of the difficulty is that a niche sport like Formula One, even though the achievement is unbelievable, when you consider what he would have had to have done to get that level of a sport, football is so pervasive. When you use that as the barometer, it is actually exceptionally difficult to make a case for almost any other sport.
Yeah, I think do you draw a limit? Is there democracy involved here? Is there? Are you worried that your virtual Mount Rushmores are going to cause offence? That's the thing.
No, there is no such concern.
Right.
Bring your biases. Bring them with you.
So okay. So let me throw some other at you, because let me give you a genuine. Got to think about this. 3-time champion jockey Richard Dunwoody is from County Down. Now, big shout that. Tony Dobbin, who won the Grand National in 1997, he was also from County Down. But I think Richard Dunwoody, you'd have to have a think about a 3-time champion jockey. Albeit if he had been born a foot taller, he wouldn't have won anything. But you can't rule him out for that, right? That's like saying basketballer, it's not their fault they're tall, so, And jockeys are the darkest people you'll ever meet, right? Do you ever have a conversation with a guy with the jump jockeys? Darkest characters you'll ever meet. Yeah. Think about it. You're 4'9", and for anywhere between 4'9" and 5'4", and every day you get on top of this beast in a saddle. Sorry, I'm going to decline that. You get on top of a beast in a saddle.
Starve yourself.
You starve yourself. You travel around the world in the back of these, driving from this place. Because we see the big rip, but they're racing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And they're actually quite dark characters, all of them. I've never met one that didn't have a real streak. So I've always liked them. Always been intriguing interviews. So, Dom, what do you think you've got to think about, right?
Yeah, 100%. There's it's such a collection of people you've actually put together there. So we've got 2 that are definites.
I want to throw 2 more at you, because that's how boring I am. So first of all, I want anyone that's worried why Johnny Ray hasn't been mentioned. He's border. He's Antrim. He doesn't count, or else I'd definitely campaign to have him up. You always look for longevity, or you look for firsts. So that's why I think Richard Dunwoody, you look at longevity and you think you got to think about putting him up. Kelly Gallagher, the first ever British skier to compete in the Winter Paralympics, first ever person from Northern Ireland to compete at the Winter Olympics. She's from County Down, and she won gold in 2014. So that's like, I don't know. There's a dry ski slope. I think there was a dry ski slope. I think I went on once and I hurt my knee when I was about 8. But like, there was nowhere. I don't know where she practiced. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what was she doing? Just, there's nowhere. There's no mountains. So she's done a good job there. So I take her into consideration, and we've got to look at the Gaelic players. Now I have to say, this is Googled for me. I had to Google it. There wasn't too many Gaelic football bars in my part of town. So
we're with you.
But I've had, there's a whole list that come from down. So you've got the 1991 and 1994 All Ireland winning side. Pete McGrath led the team. James McCartan was a key in that. So I would have legendary midfielder Eamon Burns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think he's also. So I'd have to leave that to you guys. I think you'd have to take that into consideration. I think Bestie's carved in already. We started working that immediately. We didn't even wait. That was done. Would you agree it's impossible not to put Rory on it?
He's got to be there.
Yeah. And I think what we should do, because it'll make it interesting to listen to, I think we should pick one non-footballer to go up there. So I think it needs to be a Gaelic footballer, or it needs to be Richard Dunwoody. And then I think we leave the final decision, Blanchflower or Jennings.
There you go. Well, thankfully, Colin, we've got a couple of more voices on down coming up later in the programme who can certainly give us the Gaelic football head. Well, like
you've gone over. You're going. I'm not even in the final committee.
I'm taking your Pete McGrath selection as final. And by the way, you're talking there, it's either Jennings or Dunwoody. We can toss it there at the moment.
Your input is really important here today, Colin. The other two guys that are coming up a bit later in the show, I'm not sure that they've got George Best on the mountain.
Well, then you need to look at the quality of your contributors. Just because we're in the middle of a global pandemic doesn't mean you guys should drop the quality of guests that you're getting. If anyone's going to come on and say the guy that Pele said was the greatest footballer in the world isn't in the top 4 sports people in County Down, they need to be drug tested immediately, right? Because they're absolutely off their nuts.
Yeah. So the way we've been working is that we've been getting a couple of people on to actually give their Mount Rushmore effectively, and then somebody would come on for a cameo appearance to make one change to the Mount Rushmore. You are basically filling the cameo appearance today, but I don't want to waste this on putting George Best on the mountain because he should absolutely be there.
Right, exactly.
So assuming George Best and Rory McIlroy are both there, for you personally, who would be your number 3? Who would be the number 1 person you'd be pushing outside of those two?
That's really difficult because part of me wants to say Danny Blanchflower, but I think Richard Dunwoody's probably going to get lost in the whole conversation. 3 times a champion jockey. So I think I will. Oh my God, my heart's racing. Who would have thought a make-believe mountain and down could do this to me? And again, you see Blanchflower and Jennings. A lot of people put Jennings above Blanchflower. So, oh my goodness, that's really, really difficult. I'm looking at the mountain now. Say McIlroy's there. Say Best is there. Would it be weird to not have Jennings or Blanchflower up there? Not really. Because, well, you can't compare apples and oranges, right? Sport. I'll go Richard Dunwoody.
I think that's a serious shout.
Yeah.
I think your point earlier on about it being a bit of a shootout between Richard Dunwoody and maybe Pete McGrath or Sean O'Neill from the GA side is bang on. I think that it'll come down to small margins between them.
Let's do that. Who would have thought that? Who would have thought Dunwoody would have been the last name on my lips?
It's an unbelievable selection of characters you've just gone through there, and I mean that in characters as well as actual sports people. And in terms of the other Mount Rushmores we've done, in terms of some of the other counties, Down is right up there, I think, in terms of per capita and the output of icons, global icons.
That's probably a little known fact, but in County Down, there's 6 bars for every 1 house, so that may have something to do with the characters. So that's not a lot of people. It is a strange county, though. It is a strange county. So you can have pick someone out from Newry who's in it, and then you can pick someone out from Bangor that's in it. So it sort of sweeps all the way down. So even I, someone who's from an area that is bang in County Down, I've had to really look to see, just to make sure and checking all the, oh yeah, Craig definitely is lifted, so that's good. Bloomfield's definitely lifted. And even Richard Dunwoody, I didn't have him down as being, I think I made a wee note somewhere of where exactly he's from in County Down, but I had to properly look it up to make sure he definitely was. But you're right, it's a really, really, really strong list. Really, really strong list. So he was, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so he's definitely he's the sleeper, I think, in this.
Mm.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to you at some point to talk about Judge Maggio, right? Like
Anytime.
We're coming back to do that.
Well, you know what he did, which is he obviously had a very, very, and some horrific details of it, but his relationship with Marilyn Monroe, so it was up and down, and he for the rest of his life he claimed that it was the US government that killed her. But I think it was twice a week he sent roses to her grave.
Still doing it,
until
isn't he?
He died. Is he?
Yeah, I think that's part of the will, that there was money left to put a rose at her grave every day. I'm not sure if that money is still going or not.
Well, that's you'd be gutted if you were his kids, wouldn't you? And you thought you were getting a whole load of money. It's like finding it went to the cat's home or something, isn't it?
A few plastic roses and just keep recycling them, we'll be fine.
Exactly.
Listen, Colin, it's been great having you on. It's been fascinating listening to how you thought through this, and especially at relatively short notice, you've done a brilliant kind of breakdown of the County Down sports legends. I hope you're keeping well, and thanks a million for taking the call.
You too, guys. Always nice to see you. Take care.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
I'm listening to the show every morning, and you can say it's grand. It's not grand if you're not on it, though.
OTB's Mount Rushmore.
Some talent in Cork, isn't there? Wow. A few of the GA boys weren't happy, but it was my sporting hero. I was contesting, I think, against Jimmy Barry Murphy. So once you're in that company, everything is good.
Join the debate across all our social channels at Off the Ball.
It's very, very special. Believe me, I think it becomes more special when you're on the couch, because there's something unfortunately inside me that's ultra competitive, and I need to be there.
Catch the live decision making over the next few months on OTB AM, live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
OTB AM.
12 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning. You're with us here on OTB AM. Colin Murray there, obviously chatting to myself and Adrian last night. Adrian, it's decided George Best is officially a County Down person. Rory McIlroy, I think we always knew was a County Down person. They are two signed, sealed and delivered before we get into Conor, Deegan and Donal O'Neill later on, I dare say.
I mean, you and I very much feel that way. I think the audience will feel that way. In fact, there's been some people that have been in contact with us already today when we've asked the question online about whether George Best is going to make that County Down list, and a couple of comments. Patrick Logan saying that maybe County Antrims, and Colm Nolan saying that he's going to go out on a limb and say that it's unlikely he'll get in County Down. But I think people just don't appreciate, and to be fair, neither did we as of yesterday, and we really should have called Colin Murray as our very first port to call, because he knows, and he's unequivocal about it, that George Best is from County Down, and there's no great debate about it.
When you know the exact house and the specific location of where somebody grew up, it is impossible to argue against that. So the argument has been won. George Best is from County Down, but there may be other arguments regarding Antrim down the line.
To be fair, the County Down list is unbelievable, like incredible. We hadn't even factored Danny Blanchflower into any conversation, and it was already very competitive. But interesting stuff from Colin. He did his work around the GA players as well. And Pete McGrath there, a few big names. Be interesting to see what way the lads are going to go later on. Obviously, two very GA selectors to come a little bit later on. How influenced they're going to be. And we'll have to try and best represent Colin's views later on when it comes to this debate.
I'm sold, though. I think that only one GA person gets in there now. I really do. I think that it's going to have to. I think Blanchflower or Dunwoody really have
Dunwoody
to. He was a phenomenal shout, actually, and again. somebody you need to be reminded is from County Down as well. So it's going to be unbelievably competitive for any of the legends of 91 or 94, or even the legends way back into the middle of the 20th century.
Well, Sean O'Neill, it seems, is like, again, not a name I was at all familiar with, but you do a little bit of digging about him, and bloody hell, what a player. Like, it's probably him, Rory, George Best, and Richard Dunwoody that's where we need to be headed on. That's what I'm saying.
Danny Blanchflower, not a happy man this morning. The fans of Danny Blanchflower, not happy people this morning. And Pat Jennings as well, obviously. Let's tell you what's coming up this morning on OTB AM. We're with you until 10 o'clock this morning. We're going to be getting into the sports pages in just a moment. Niall Quinn will be with us at 8:30 this morning, chatting through the latest in terms of a return to play, what's going on at the FAI and the League of Ireland and the stakeholders meetings this week. We'll have a last-minute guide to picking a Bundesliga team as well this morning. We're stacking them up with Irish counties and seeing which Bundesliga team fits your county. We've got the down Mount Rushmore continuing then after 9 o'clock. Donal O'Neill will be with us, as well as Conor Deegan, as we've mentioned. How's the Head then this morning features Kilkenny's all-star camogie forward Katie Power, who also happens to be a personal trainer, so that'll be a good edition of How's the Head. And then the crappy quiz coming your way at 25 to 10. It is Ger versus Nathan versus Adrian. Time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
We start this morning with offtheball.com, leading with John Giles from last night. Carlos Alberto told me to F off John Giles and the World Cup final of 1970, I presume. John Giles wrestled the world's 11. I used to dream about playing them. At the heart and soul of Black America in one fight, Tyson versus Holyfield's revisit. Great boxing content as well from last night's show. Brilliant stuff from start to finish, actually, from the lads from 7 to 10 last night. The 32 Mount Rushmore's meanwhile Down's greatest sports people. And I got stuck and my wheels started to turn. Des McAleenan, who was on the show the previous night. So great stuff there on offtheball.com.
On the Irish Independent on this Friday morning, picture there, Michael Conlon in his home, what appears to be his garage, keeping sharp, obviously in lockdown, and everybody adapting to new training circumstances. That's Michael Conlon at home, gearing up. Dan McDonald, meanwhile, on League of Ireland players wish to return the PFAI survey, which says that 87% of pros do want in if the government green-lighted. So they do want testing. They want testing before training initially, and then they want testing every week before games. And Dan is saying that the 13%, which was the first thought that jumped to mind for me, he says they won't be put under pressure to return. Like, it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out in the context of the League of Ireland, the Premier League and beyond as well for those players, and they have been already voicing their opinions loudly over the last number of weeks. Sergio Aguero, probably in the Premier League, chief amongst them. There will be a number of players who won't be happy to return. It'll be interesting to see exactly what sort of pressure they are under, or overt or otherwise. Rory O'Connor on the rugby season, meanwhile, the Heineken Cup final, it's hope now that they're going to play it. This is another throw a dart at the board thing as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, look at discussions about trying to play the thing on October 17th and talk about the quarters and the semis late September, October. And Six Nations, one of the most interesting things, we'd spoken a number of weeks back, Owen, about maybe the GA. It was an article that you'd brought up from whom I can't remember, but the idea that they could actually focus on some other things. A perfect time, as pause has been forced on them, to spend a bit of time thinking about the future direction of the association and the games. And that's very much what rugby are doing at the minute. And they're talking about the long discussed idea of having an aligned global calendar. So the Rugby Championship sitting along the Six Nations, and it looks as if there might be some movement on that. So again, we'll see how that plays out over the next little while.
The Irish Times this morning leads with Philip Reid's piece that Harrington is playing by the rules and focuses on putting things right. As the PGA Tour gets ready to resume next month, Ireland's major winner is happy to adhere to COVID-19 restrictions. Great quote from him here. Obviously, Padraig Harrington famously has been playing a lot of golf outside his house. That Conor Moore remix of the Padraig Harrington video, I think, it's got well over 1 million views on Twitter. Harrington says, "I've split 5 golf balls in my bay. I have hit them so many times they actually end up cracking. I've hit a lot of golf shots." Have you ever cracked a golf ball, Adrian?
Not on contact with the club, probably after hitting a motorway close by.
The other golf story here, Rich List reveals McIlroy's net worth has risen to €192 million. Fortune has risen by €36 million on the back of a return to form and sponsorship deals. €27.5 million is the amount of money McIlroy has earned in prize money alone. 184 million quid. That is McIlroy's 10-year deal sponsorship previously signed with Nike. The 10 richest sports stars aged 30 or under in the UK. Sheahan was mentioning this on the show yesterday, but if you missed it, Gareth Bale is number one in terms of those under the age of 30, €129 million, with Anthony Joshua in second with €121 million. And then the other story here on the front of the Irish Times is barriers go up, but sport can never really be kept at bay, writes Johnny Waterson. And then a couple of rugby stories as well over the other page on page 15. Andrew Conway writing a column at the moment, natural fear of, damn, am I still able to play rugby? Gavin Comiskey writing that sport can go ahead and hopefully this is the blueprint to do it. This is Izan Asewa giving his views on the reopening of New Zealand and the return of rugby union. And then Jerry Thornley is talking about Ian McKinley. Refusal to accept defeat runs through his inspirational story.
The Irish Examiner for you on this Friday morning. Ronan O'Gara, his column takes front and centre this morning in a shot of Sam Cane there, silhouette of Sam Cane, the new All Blacks captain. The tone of the column is very much about Cane and how O'Gara is saying that he must be an unreal leader given what he himself knows about Sam Whitelock, who would have been one of the main contenders for the position. So more of that inside. The Aviva Stadium is throwing its arms open to all comers, writes Simon Lewis there. The possibility of the ground hosting behind closed doors once games do get the go-ahead. It does seem like such an obvious fit. You are suddenly not in a space where we're talking about required numbers of attendance, obviously, given the circumstances we're in, to open the ground, but more that just as a facility, it would be absolutely perfect to hold all sorts of games. There's lots of chat about, obviously, League of Ireland and beyond as well. That's for the Aviva Stadium. Also a line there on the potential new format that we've mentioned about the Heineken Cup next season. There's chat about extending it to 24 teams, which would allow, obviously, for individual nations to put forward not quite as many teams as they would want, but certainly teams that would have been on the brink of qualification for it. But at the same time, run a shorter season. They're talking about an 8-week season. What an epic 8 weeks that would be to run off a Heineken Cup. And John Fallon has that story of Derry City that's also up on offtheball.com. Derry City weighing in behind this new hypercube idea for an all-island League of Ireland, which we'll get Niall Quinn's thoughts on a bit later on.
The Herald this morning leads with that Aviva story. Aviva ready for action. Murphy says stadium is set up to cope with restrictions. This is Stadium Director Martin Murphy revealing plans are in place to sterilise the pitch using a special spray in order to make it safe for play. Majority of players want to resume. This is a clear majority of League of Ireland players who've said they want football to resume once the authorities say it is safe to do so. Philly wants one more, meanwhile, is a couple of GA stories in the top of the Herald here, and also Kingdom defeat kicked the Dubs needed. This is the 2017 Allianz League final. Packed day in Croke Park. Never beat Dublin is the moral of the story, Adrian.
That's the approach on. Is that what you're saying? There's a philosophy here.
Don't poke the bear ever.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it means that you beat the bear on that one occasion.
Yeah, listen, beat the bear. It's all good. The Irish Mirror, meanwhile, this morning, Keith Jackson saying that the uncertainty in Scotland is about to be ended with Celtic being crowned the SPL champions. There's a meeting today between clubs and the SPFL CEO today where some clarity to this, it seems, is going to be brought. And apparently all clubs have now agreed that they'll end it. There's such madness and uncertainty around the Scottish game. Needless, a lot of it, you would think. But anyway, all clubs now agreeing that they can end the season without all games being played. So we'll see how Celtic could be past the title across the boardroom table later today.
A couple of comments in on YouTube this morning, Adrian, with regards to our Mount Rushmore. David Scanlon has said, to show how good Ciara McGeehan is, she went to the 2010 World Junior Championships, where every single middle distance and distance running medal was won by an East African, apart from her 1500 metre silver, which is obviously quite, like we haven't mentioned Ciara McGeehan yet this morning. She will come up before the end of the show. There's no question about that. I think she might actually be in one of the preliminary Mount Rushmores of our two pundits later on. Pat Jennings and McIlroy for the first two then, says Germanus McGrinder, great name, on YouTube as well this morning. So no George Best in terms of the first two there for Mr. McGrinder there this morning, which is a bit of, maybe there's still actually a bit of a question mark over the location, and maybe we're actually bringing the news to people this morning that he is actually a County Down man.
That's a huge part of it. Like, I mean, I don't know if Germanus is a particularly down name, Owen, how familiar he is with the local terrain, but there's a huge part of that. Like, as I said, it was only brought to our attention, but earlier in the week, this was in fact a thing. But Kieran McGeehan, definitely a live contender. Like, you know my aversion to the idea of saying that, they're still playing, so you can leave them out. But listen, there is that option with, to give it a county like Down, wow, like the names that are there. So look, we'll see.
Going to move on to the Irish Sun this morning, and it's leading with Troy Deeney's quotes. Troy on the attack. Deeney hits out at Prem restart. Has mentioned a couple of things, just talking about the fact that football can return in June, despite the fact that people can't get haircuts. Penalty areas will be packed while the rest of the UK is social distancing is another of the lines here, which is a fair point. It actually kind of ties in with what John Horan was saying on the Sunday game last week, that why should we be treating players different from fans? If social distancing is going to be a thing for the foreseeable future, how can you play a game of football, Gaelic football or association football, with social distancing actually being implemented? So I guess it's one of the philosophical questions that's been brought up over the last couple of weeks, and Troy Deeney hitting out at that restart. Meanwhile, Tammy's fear for dad. Tammy Abraham fears he could give his asthmatic dad coronavirus if football returns too soon. Abraham lives with his family and is ready to play for Chelsea tomorrow as long as it is safe. But obviously he's got a bit of fear for his father, who has asthma.
Yeah. The Irish Daily Star, meanwhile, this morning, exclusive by Paul Lennon here, says the Mazars report into the FAI's finances set to be finalised by the end of the month. He reports that we are set to see new detail on the arrangements between the FAI and their former CEO, John Delaney, particularly in relation to the accommodation that was the bill for which was being footed by the FAI. So it seems like there's more detail to come on that, and we shall know it before the month is out. He says, Ben Gibson says that racing in Britain is to return with an 8-race card at Newcastle on June the 1st. And Jeremy Cross writes about comments from Enda Stevens and John Egan, the Sheffield pair, and how they believe that players will be safe when the Premier League return is called, that they have to trust the organisers, that everything will be in place, and very much that they want to get back playing and believe that it's doable.
The Daily Telegraph this morning leads with a couple of interesting stories. Six Nations open to spring switch. Move to align dates with Rugby Championship. July tests could move to autumn in global calendar. So basically Six Nations could shift from its traditional window of February and March to allow it to take place at the same time as the Southern Hemisphere's Rugby Championship, in a radical overhaul of the global calendar, to say the least. It makes sense, though, to have these things more in line. Elements within the Six Nations are open to the idea of pushing the start of the championship back a month to March and April as part of a compromise with the Southern Hemisphere, who would bring their tournament from August. So is this the end of the turgid conditions that we often witness at Six Nations games, Adrian? This is the start of a brand new fruitful era for silky rugby.
I fear you're about to mock my sort of old man thoughts here, and it does feel like a very, the club finals have got to be played on St. Patrick's Day feel. But like, there is something brilliant about having the Six Nations, like in the depth of the deep dark winter or just slightly beyond it, like something to look forward to. And the fact that it's back a month now, yes, better conditions of course, but we've got to wait a bit longer, which, give me the Six Nations earlier on is what I'm saying. Yeah,
all for it. A couple of other things there. Harry Kane photographed on the front of the Telegraph sports section with a Leyton Orient jersey. He's going to sponsor their jersey, and thank you Frontline Heroes is what's going to appear on the jersey itself. You've also got ECB to charter plane to bring West Indies over for Test Series, host to foot tourist flight bills of around 400 grand. So they're really keen to get that England win these series up and running. Premiership to get tough on breaches of salary cap. Meanwhile, while players fear lack of injury treatment in restart plan, that's obviously one of the early concerns actually that were aired when the idea of a behind closed doors Premier League was floated, that there will be a bit of a strain on the frontline staff and on the emergency services, and obviously a few concerns being voiced by players.
The Guardian, meanwhile, also has that photograph, a lot of the UK papers do, of Harry Kane's gesture to Leyton Orient, the main picture there, and the support for frontline workers as well. Ben Fisher writes about Premier League clubs looking for answers from organisers in relation to how a return would look exactly, so the specific detail of it, and several questions there, including, which is an interesting one, what happens if in fact a player does test positive for coronavirus at some point? Like, does the team have to sit it out after that? Is there a sort of probation period? Exactly how does it work? That when that crops up. So that's Ben Fisher in The Guardian.
The London Times leads with a story about salary cap and breaches in rugby. Ban players over salary cap breaches. Damning review calls for strict new powers. So this is obviously Premiership Rugby's salary cap system. This is Lord Miners, a former government minister who was commissioned by the PRL to undertake the review, obviously after the Saracen situation earlier on this year. And he said, I've met no players who I would consider unable to understand their own finances. He's produced a 55-page report with 52 recommendations, so players will be held more accountable than they've ever been. There'll be a flexibility for the disciplinary panel to impose punishments that fit the crime, which include the removal of titles, the return of prize money, suspension from the league and relegation. So things are going to get a lot more strict than those who want to flout some of the rules when it comes to the salary cap in the Premiership. Minister, make TV games free. The government has called on the Premier League to widen access to live televised matches after opening the door for football to return next month. And England stars can go home. England players will be allowed to leave the biosecure bubble to visit their families during the 10-week period proposed for Test cricket this summer. So it's not a bubble at all, really.
And the Irish news finally from me, Neil Loughran writing here about Banty's comments that the GAA president, obviously the Med last weekend, John Horan, is effectively just laying the ground for no 2020 championship and that he's just trying to soften the blow for people. That's the Irish news for you.
Finally for me, it is the Irish Daily Mail. Stay at home. Jose's blast at boss is fearful of Prem return. Mourinho, he's told Premier League managers to stay at home and watch the Bundesliga if they are reluctant to return to action. So he's itching to complete the season, although he was fairly pivotal in actually pushing the return of the season back by a week this week. So fixtures in Germany obviously taking place tomorrow, and Mourinho raring to go. The Spurs boss said, I want to train and I'm desperate for the Premier League to return as soon as it is safe to do so, particularly now we are seeing other leagues return to action. You've also got that Tammy Abraham story as well, worried about his asthmatic father, and GAA season not worth the risk, says Treaty boss. This is Billy Lee, the football manager.
Just good to have Jose in the paper zone where he's not taking a public training session against guidelines.
It's true. It's great that he hasn't been photographed by paparazzi, actually controlling the narrative. We've got a couple of comments in. Bryce has been in touch on YouTube to say, can't sleep stateside. Stumbled upon you guys. Y'all are awesome. Well, y'all are awesome too, Bryce. Thanks a million for joining us.
That's what insomnia does to you.
Yeah, it's that is a deep level of insomnia, Bryce. Kevin says, good morning, lads, from Slovakia. A couple of texts in saying, OTB, lads, I'm an East Belfast boy cocooning in Westmeath. What is it about Westmeath, Adrian, that anybody would want to cocoon there? George Best is originally from Orangefield, East Belfast, County Down. Fact, love the show, keep up the good work. That's from David Bartlett. Another one is off the ball. Hi lads, you were talking about a down/Antrim Mount Rushmore. You forgot Alex Hurricane Higgins. Thanks, Peter. It's not a down/Antrim Mount Rushmore at all, actually. It's just down. No. And my cousin Ronan Rafferty is from Newry, several Ryder Cups and European Tour winner, says Jerry and Tip. Another good shout.
Is that a thing? Because, yeah, he's definitely in the mixer.
As we frantically Google the actual situation here. Yeah, he's born in Newry. So that's another option there. It's a stacked county, to say the very least, and it's going to be interesting. So we've had Colin Murray earlier on, if you've just joined us. He's basically leaning towards, he's definitely got Rory McIlroy and George Best up in the mountain, leaning towards Richard Dunwoody, I think, wasn't it? And then Danny Blanchflower potentially as his fourth, but he's put his hands up and says he will bow to the knowledge of Conor, Deegan and Donal O'Neill when it comes to selecting a GAA head, because a GAA person will probably make the down Mount Rushmore. But McIlroy and Best, the two up there at the moment. We've got Niall Quinn coming very shortly indeed, but in the meantime we've been asking how's the head and hearing what Irish sports people are doing to keep their mental health in order and find out what advice they've found useful from their sporting careers that has served them well during this stressful time.
I think I've adjusted fairly well. Obviously when I came in first, there was like a sense of panic and what are we going to do? No training, no gyms, like no meeting friends and stuff. But I rent in Kilkenny, but I came home for lockdown, back down to my home house. So I won't say I'm enjoying it, because obviously under the circumstances it's not there to be enjoyed, but I've taken the kind of more positive approach towards it, and I've tried to do things that I've been putting on the back burner for months, and I just realistically probably wouldn't have had time to have done these things before all this happened. So I'm trying to be as positive and to use it to my benefit. You know, I just try not to be negative about things, because there is people in a lot worse circumstances than me. You know, like I don't have a family, I don't have a house to pay for, nothing like that. So yeah, just it hasn't been treating me too bad, except for the sling and the arm, but apart from that, like not too bad at all. I enrolled in another course, so I'm a qualified personal trainer and I have a certificate in nutrition already, but I did want to kind of upskill and, you know, get more courses under my belt. So I enrolled in Setanta College there in Thurles. So I'm doing sports nutrition course at the moment. So I'm just finished it now. I'm doing the second project there, just taking a study break now just to chat to yourself. But yeah, just small things like that, and just focusing on myself, because before this happened, like my life was so busy. I literally had like half an hour in the evening to get something to eat, and I was just back to bed again and getting up the next day to do the same thing, and, you know, working loads, trying to train, rehab, pre-season, you know, everything was just, it's only now when I've kind of stopped, I've realised, you know, like, Jesus, I don't know if I can go back to do everything I was doing before all this happened. Like, so yeah, just I've been keeping myself extremely busy now. This week obviously is a bit slower with the arm, but up to now I've been busy every day, yeah, so it's good. I had a bad finger injury, so I just, obviously last summer then it blew up even worse and worse, so I just obviously played through all of that at the time, because it was about 3 weeks out from a semi-final, and obviously there was nothing going to happen at that stage, so it was just getting injections to play the semi-final, and then we got through to the final, so that as well. And then we got a good run with the club, so we were playing with the club until the end of October, and was just trying to get through those games. Like, it was, to be honest, it was a nightmare, because it was the hand I catch the ball in, like, even to try practice myself, like every time the ball hit the finger, like, it was just, it was excruciating, and I always knew I had to get something done with it. It was just a matter of whenever we finished up with the club and getting referrals, and obviously meeting the right surgeon and stuff, so ended up getting operated on the start of February. It was just a lot worse than we all thought. Like, I thought, geez, I had finger surgery back in 6 or 8 weeks, but there was so much damage done. They actually, the first surgery, they had to take a bone out of my hand to reconstruct my finger, so that was obviously a bit of a disappointment, because I thought it would have been back a lot sooner. I would have got in some of the league games, but look, you know, I was going to be back hopefully, you know, come May time, but, you know, as it proceeded, I didn't really miss a whole lot. And it was just about 10-11 weeks post-surgery, just ready to have a few bucks, and went again, and I knew there wasn't something right. You know, I could feel something moving around, so I just went under the knife there again last Thursday. So, you know, here's hoping this one will last, and I won't have to go back up with it again. It's looking increasingly likely there's not going to be anything played this year, and you know, maybe for, you know, the best for the country, like, there's not inter-county games played. You know, we're sports people, we're amateurs, we have to go to work, we have to come home to our families as well, but, you know, maybe next year or whenever inter-county starts back, you know, like, we'll go at it our best, and we have the dream obviously of getting back there, but as I said, so do, you know, 6 or 7 other teams as well. I'm a bit on the fence myself, because obviously we really want to go back, we're competitive, we're athletes, this is what we love to do, but, you know, I have bad asthma myself. You know, there's girls on our team that their parents have battled serious illnesses throughout the year. Like, how can you expect us to go into a dressing room with 40 other girls, or stand beside someone and they're coughing and spluttering and sniffling up on top of you, and like, we have to go to work the next day, so you're going to bring that into your workspace then the next day after that? I don't know. I don't know really. I'm completely on the fence. I'd love to get back playing matches and even just training, you know. But for the health and safety of everyone, I just don't see where it is possible for us. Like, it's different for soccer players because they're professionals. They can cocoon, but we can't. Like, we have to go to make our living and we have to go see our family.
Yeah, Kilkenny's all-star camogie forward Katie Power there in conversation with Will O'Callaghan for How's the Head, our new series, getting advice from sporting people around Ireland in terms of what served them well during the stressful time. One thing that might serve a few people well over the next couple of weeks, Adrian, is a return to sport. Bundesliga tomorrow, is it going to be something that you're going to flick on for a little bit?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I'd mentioned it was, it seems like a long time ago now. There was one Friday morning we were on and there was A-League on, Australian A-League. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
A month ago, 5 weeks ago.
Good times.
And like the standard was pure muck, but obviously you're watching it and you're heavily invested. I did miss out. There was like 4 goals in 10 minutes and I happened to come in just after that. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the Korean League last week, you didn't flick that on for a while.
I didn't see any of that.
Free to air on YouTube. We were chatting about it a little bit yesterday morning. It's great to see what some leagues are actually doing in terms of innovation to make this thing feel a little bit normal. And actually, the whole process of playing artificial crowd sounds actually isn't as terrible as you might expect. Unless you were, I'm not sure, are you pro or against it? Because I was certainly very anti the idea of fake crowd noises, because how can you replicate it? But it actually, there's some part of your brain that actually recognises it and plays along with it as if it is real.
I'm 100% up for looking at how that would sound. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of back to that conversation you were scoffing at the was it the Japanese baseball? Was that the thing we were looking at last week? And there was like the cardboard cutouts, the mock-up of the cardboard cutouts around the front row.
No, I'm not all for the cardboard cutouts. I think that's just weird. Like that, like that is just.
I think they fall into the exact same category.
Really?
Yeah, like it's both are weird, both are odd, both are things a couple of months ago you would have gone, this is totally ridiculous, let's not even go down this route. But definitely I think both are just worth, like, let's have a look at them.
Yeah, it was done in the Bundesliga before they wrapped up. You had that behind closed doors game in Mönchengladbach, I think, and I think they sold like it was 10,000 cardboard cutouts, and I mean sold. I think I had the figure yesterday, 19 quid or something like that, to actually support the club and actually put your face in the crowd. Like, it's would you pay that?
That's an unusual idea.
Say if Athlone Town back in the day, or Westmeath GAA, if you had the opportunity, or no, sorry, for you, Leinster, if there was a cardboard cutout of Adrian Barry in the posh seats in the Aviva Stadium allowed to be cut out for you, would you pay 19 quid for that?
Would I be allowed to have a glass of wine in my hand?
Well, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know the lengths I'd go to for the greatest team that have ever played sport in any area of the planet. It goes without saying. Look, I don't know. I think that's a bit weird. Like, I suppose that's just a question of whether you want to support your club or your county or whatever to get out of some financial, as opposed to like having any wish to have your head on a cardboard cut out in the stadium seems fairly ludicrous.
It does indeed. We'll have more on the Bundesliga in just a moment. Crappy quiz coming later as well, and the conclusion to our county down, Mount Rushmore. But I'm delighted to say now that the Deputy Chief Executive of the FAI, Niall Quinn, is with us on the line. Good morning to you, Niall. How are things?
Hi, you guys. Yeah, good, thanks. How are you all?
Very well. So just a couple of things. We'll get straight into it. It's obviously been a fairly busy week for yourself, for the League of Ireland. Been a few steering groups meeting this week. Can you just, first of all, outline what the main discussion points for you and the association have been this week, and what's been up for talk and what's been achieved?
Well, I think the story you want to hear is about the League of Ireland and the work that's going on behind the scenes. But I can assure you there's work going on grassroots just as much, other parts in governance, etc. So the FAI is very busy and active at the moment. You mentioned steering groups. I'm on 11, and they're all meeting fairly regularly in COVID-19, and we are, trying very hard to make sure that we give enough time to all of our constituents. But the stuff that makes the newspapers, or the topical stuff, of course, is the League of Ireland, whether that can come back through a behind closed doors format or not. And that's taken up a lot of time, I will admit that. We're also speaking to the clubs about the bigger picture of a new participation agreement that would see, I suppose, the clubs feeling a lot more comfortable about life working with the FAI and how the leagues might go in the future. So that debate has started, and there's unity there, and that's quite good. And we have a lot of constituents and stakeholders who will, you know, be involved in that in some way, or not just the League of Ireland clubs. So how our young players and the elite game, you know, accepts them in, and how our, you know, I suppose our feeder clubs, if you want to call them that, are compensated, etc. So there's lots of stuff going on, but I guess you guys want to talk more about the League of Ireland.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned there that building up a bit of a comfort working with the FAI is one of the points on the agenda, and that is just of such high importance at the moment, given all the risks that come with the current crisis. How well have things developed to the point where you think that the League of Ireland clubs are actually comfortable now and trust the FAI to actually take them in the right direction?
Well, I think one of the things we did, I suppose, was to, you know, hand over the document to them and say, okay, guys, what would it look like, you know, in your world if it was perfect, and let's see if we can work together on that and drive forward. And we're in that process now, so I think that's something that will be worked on quite quickly. You know, I think the clubs will have their say. They will have grievances, of course, and there's a lack of trust for what went on before. We get that, so this isn't a simple process. But at the same time, I think if the criteria is strong, if everybody is pushing for the league to go into a better place and not just survive, and if, as I say, the pathway of young boys and young girls is secure, and if the clubs commit to community activity, and if they commit to a programme that would see improved facilities, and women's football needs to be just as important, and all the other stuff, the commercial conversations, everything else will fall into place. And that's where we go. We're just working through that and how terms of reference can be drawn up between us, that we can go on a good journey. And then, of course, you have the added intricacies of the All-Ireland League that is much talked about as well. So there's plenty there, and we're getting through it as well as we can. But I'd like to think the spirit is good. The clubs are all taking part at this point, so you know you would have all 19 clubs present at every meeting so far. We meet every Thursday, and it's not just we meet and say nothing till the next week. A lot of activity then takes place from Thursday to Thursday, and I'm quite confident that you know that's going to stay on a good course, and we'll get to a participation agreement that you know everybody is happy with, and we move on together.
Two things on the you mentioned the All-Ireland League. Niall, the Kieran Lucid interest obviously been over the last year and a bit. The Hypercube stuff that has come through this week as well, and we see Derry City last night coming out in full support of that. Firstly, in terms of your own outlook, is it very much your belief that you want the League of Ireland to remain under the auspices of the FAI, or do you view it as an opportunity with some of these outside investors coming in to actually cut it loose, and maybe there's a better scenario for the League of Ireland over there in the first instance? And then secondly, I know you mentioned on the League of Ireland podcast this week about a guaranteed pot for the league going forward, and a lot of this conversation obviously does boil down to the cash, sure, I suppose, and where it comes from. So yeah, secondly, where is that cash going to come from?
Okay, well, in relation to the All-Ireland League, you know, first of all, the starting point for the FAI is we must be in dialogue with our counterparts for this to go anywhere, and hope that you know that the IFA see it fit to at least discuss you know what it all might look like, and even how that conversation starts. So we're at a very early point of the whole process, if you like. But you know, we wouldn't be shy in saying we think it looks outstanding in terms of comparing it to where we have been in the past. It looks, it's bold, but it's also, you know, very well stocked with good ideas, good insight, and of course, but like everything, you know, the certainty will be around, you know, the true financial audit. But I think, and obviously by that I mean, you know, that will the things that they say may happen, will they actually happen? But of course, that's long after, you know, the most important part, and that's it, finding a place with the IFA that we don't offend, you know, the Football Association up in the north, and that they feel it's right and appropriate. You know, there's a bit of talking to be done, I would say, and I would hope that those talks at least start. You know, I think that's about as much as I would say in it at this point. Are they reluctant, Niall? Can I take that from what you're saying? No, absolutely. That's not the point. We just haven't had the format to literally sit around the table, and we won't. We'll be doing like everybody else does, perhaps, if that does happen. But you know, we're looking at that, and they possibly they're looking at it as well, and we'll have a little bit more information on that in time. You know, there's been a brief contact, but I just don't want to get people carried away. Big headlines don't help in a situation like this, you know.
And would you rather, just for clarity on your own side, would you rather it did stay within the FAI auspices then?
So I'm. You'll see, if you look back on any of the quotes that I made even before I came in here, anything that improves the game has to be looked at, and I think that's why we're anxious to have the conversations with the IFA to see, is this right for both of us, because it actually looks right. And would I be jumping up and down a big banner saying it has to come in? No, I think there's sensitivities around it which would prevent me from doing that. But let's put it this way. We like the spirit of it. We like the work that's gone in as an association, and we think it should definitely be discussed. So that's as far as I was going. I'm not, I can't say I'm a raging fan, because that would lead you the wrong way, that we've gone too far down the road. It's baby steps, but we're very comfortable with it at this point.
Okay, and just in terms of the cash then, like that guaranteed path that you spoke about and the funding, where is the money going to come from?
Okay, well, first of all,
in the short term, in relation to
in the short term for behind closed doors. Okay, I'll lead that into question that actually the most important thing is the medical safety of players, officials, etc., and anyone who would attend the games, the people in charge of the production to get the TV pictures, etc., and the streaming pictures, and all other necessary components of that, the medical staff that would be in place, and also the build-up in terms of players being tested, making sure the environment is safe. So that's priority number one. Priority number two was working out what all that would cost, how could it all be implemented, and then on top of that, how can we look at getting the clubs some form of incentive to say, yeah, it was good to come back and play. So as we spoke to the clubs yesterday, and some reports have appeared in the paper today, not wholly accurate, but we have outlined where that whole medical procedure, A, can be paid for, and we visibility of that, but B, that we take the onus of responsibility away from the clubs in actually producing it and delivering it. So by moving to stadiums and playing games regularly in the one stadium with the one professional team, both cleansing and making sure medical protocols are taken, we've got the ability to do that, bearing in mind with conversations we've had with 3 stadiums. So that's a start, taking that onus of responsibility away from volunteers at clubs, that they had to somehow secure stadiums medically. That was a big help, and that was a big worry for clubs. To see the visibility of that being paid for, that's quite good. I'll mention streaming now, just to add to it. Streaming would see a lot of production costs and a lot of effort being put in to get every game that's going to be played, if it is played, out there with a potential of revenue coming in. Now, what we've done on that, again, we see visibility of the cost of that. So we've got the medical side of it done, and now we're saying we have the cost, everything it would take to get it out there. If we received 0 and nobody watched a streaming game, we have it paid for. We have the medical side paid for. Now the next bit to look at, which didn't receive a lot of input, the next is the club's costs. And is it worth it for them to come back and play in this situation, bearing in mind, player salaries, etc. And if that's somewhere where we can get to, then great, because they all have different ideas of what they need for that. And some get a little bit confused, thinking, oh, well, we have to pay season ticket holders back. You have that issue anyway. So this is the incremental issue, that if you had the games, what would it mean to you, and can we make it better for you in the overall context of the position you're in now to play these matches? And that being the way, that there's a possible return from streaming, but we're not factoring it in. But we are looking at ways of getting I suppose, more money into the pot to ease the club's worries on that front. And rather than, people are putting figures out in the papers money, rather than give those figures out and I suppose have a challenge going on in public, we're just working very hard behind the scenes to come to an amount where the clubs will feel it's all been really well put together and it's worth doing. And there's 2 other reasons for doing it for us as well and for the clubs. The players. The players are the stars of the show here, and they have sometimes been forgotten in this debate. Some of them have been let go from some of the clubs. Others are very worried. It's tough, the contract situation. If we don't play the games, what happens? And how do we dig the brand out of the ground next year if we have to wait till next February with all these contracts gone? It becomes very messy. So we as an association believe it's very important to try and get this done, to try and find a financial way to make it all possible. That perhaps, the worst time ever with this pandemic. So it's not simple, and clubs are worried, and Scepticism has been replaced by, okay, I need to see a little bit more now. They're happier that we have a process going on that is working, long hours to fulfil the criteria needed to get this going. But another reason for doing it as well, the other sports then will see us out there. If we get out in July the 20th appears to be the first date to come back at this time. If we can get out there and we're starting sport again, I think it's important for the country and almost in a mental well-being play that they see sport at the level that we are in the League of Ireland, taking part, producing and getting back to some form of normality. And then, you can see that follow on from that will be the other sports, but also importantly for us, our amateur sport and how all our grassroots clubs and our amateur clubs can get back into play. We're doing lots of work on that as well. It doesn't make the headlines, but we will have some declarations on that shortly too. So are we there with the medical go ahead? No, and we can't outrun government or HSE on this, but we are working very hard with them, and we feel we'll have more news on that in the coming days, which will make life a little bit clearer. And I suppose, the finances, you've hit the nail on the head and say, it has to be done. We're not there yet, and we haven't completed the journey on finalising the finances. So I don't think people should stop now and say, what is it? I think they should give us a little bit more time to bring more certainty to the table so that clubs can make that decision whether it's worth it for them to go back or not.
Niall, you mentioned the other sports there and how it would be great for football to kind of lead the way in the country. I'd just be keen to get your views on what John Horan, the president of the GAA, said last weekend, that while social distancing is a thing in Ireland, he can't see Gaelic games going ahead because obviously you can't play GAA. It's the same for football. You can't play those sports while social distancing you can't play it in a social distanced manner. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have concerns for the safety of the players? Because Horan was certainly speaking from the standpoint of not wanting to put his players in any danger.
Well, absolutely, and that's a priority. And I tell you that the reports this morning that our players are very keen to get back, you may have seen that. It's very welcome, but we must protect them at all costs. And I do believe, we're speaking from the same hymn sheet, although John did a very long interview, a very, very good interview, I thought. But we are working with the GAA and with the IRFU together in understanding when social distancing and contact can meet. And that's a big question, and around that there are many sub-questions. But again, we're looking for our government and HSE to tell us when that moment comes, and we're kind of ready to act on it. And that's the big question. But there are tons of other questions just to make sure that we can ensure that safety that's needed for players, officials, referees. They sometimes get forgotten about as well. But there will be a number of people at each game who are at risk. And what I would say to you is that, we've done everything we believe we can to ensure that safety should we get the go-ahead in terms of testing players, in terms of, the whole medical requirement for staging a game in this circumstance. We feel we have visibility on the cost of implementing that. So we can implement it. It's just, can we envisage a corner kick being taken and 16 people in the box at the one time before the ball comes over? Will government let us do that? And that's a kind of a simple explanation, and there's lots of sub-questions to that. But that's as good a way as I can point it out to you.
From an overall point of view, Niall, I'd say it's pretty obvious that a pandemic is the last thing that the FAI needed at this point, given what had happened earlier in the year, given the financial package that was agreed of €20 million across 3 years. One of the questions that I would have is that automatically still going to be enough? I know we're still at the very early stages of this. We don't know the full financial impact this is going to have on our economy and to the livelihoods of everybody around the country. But are you concerned at all about that financial rescue package, that might not be enough to actually take the FAI out of the danger zone?
Well, you also have to look at the fact that we've put our entire staff on 50% wage deferrals. So, it is a big worry. We didn't inherit a great situation, but what I would say is I'm delighted that we got the ability to bring new money into the association via the deal with Bank of Ireland, and also we have the government deal that you spoke about, which we're putting the finishing touches to in terms of the governance around that. And as you know, UEFA gave us some help as well. So without that, I'd hate to think where we'd be. And the fact that was done before the pandemic, was a real blessing looking back. Thankfully, that happened. There are big challenges, of course there are. At this point, we were hoping we might even be getting ready for Euros with big money coming in at the time when you were doing those conversations with government. We were also looking at international matches with full houses and what have you. So there's a big challenge in place, but we believe we can get there, and we think unity in the game would be a fabulous outcome of this if we survive it with unity and go stronger. I think always in times of crisis there's opportunity, and that's something that we're holding on to and clinging on to, and hope the clubs do too. But we get the impression that at the top end game with the League of Ireland and in the provinces with our amateur game, that there is more unity coming into play, and people want to see this go the right journey, and we'll lead that, and hopefully we'll overcome those challenges that you mentioned.
Yeah, and then just one other one I had on that, Niall, was when you're looking for alternative revenue streams at the moment, and when your initial revenue streams come from people going through the turnstiles, that is a huge part of how the FAI and the League of Ireland clubs are financed. We are starting to see the likes of the advertising market collapse a little bit in terms of advertisers not wanting to spend money. Mm-hmm. That, I presume, I know you don't want to reveal any particular deals that you have potentially in the pipeline, but I presume it's something along those lines that might actually be in the pipeline. Have you found a reluctance from people to actually spend money and thereby actually halt what you're hoping to do in terms of actually getting more new revenue streams into the FAI?
Well, it depends where we're looking and searching for revenue streams. So as I kind of said the other day, I don't really want to disclose that. But I think one thing I must point out very quickly, that we're talking about the SSE Electricity League, and that won't change. And they've been very good to us for a long period of time, and they'll be by our side in this journey if we can make it. So that's important to know, that this is their league, and whatever we do in terms of how it's completed, be it a shortened season or whatever way it works, it's an SSE Electricity play, and we're delighted about that. They've been great to us. So the areas that we're trying to look in, and bring in extra revenue are outside that, and it's going quite well. But I don't want to put it in jeopardy, because there's so much of the jigsaw still to click into place. But as we told the clubs yesterday, I think there was some accuracy in the papers this morning. We do see visibility of the medical costs being paid, and we do see the streaming output all paid. And, if the government wage subsidy scheme stays in place, then it could start to look pretty attractive, I would hope, to the clubs, or it's getting nearer what attractive might look like. And, if we can bring in other costs then and guarantee them, then the streaming revenue becomes a bonus for the clubs. And that's the area we're trying to get to, and we're working very hard at it. If we could achieve that, the 2 out of 10 of 3 weeks ago, the 7 out of 10 that it is today, that would move up the scale. And that's what we're working on, and pressurising us to reveal how we're doing it is not good if we want to get a good outcome,
And I can ask you, outside of the obviously the current, which is most of the conversation we've been having up to now in relation to obviously the impact of coronavirus and the finances and that sort of thing, it's probably a fair enough point to ask you. I think about 3.5 months into the job at this stage, and I wondered if the aftermath of the previous administration has surprised you, or has it been as you would expect it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that the people that work in the FAI that we came in to work with have been absolutely outstanding. And in the most difficult of times, coming through a horror show, but not just within the association, but publicly as well. It was a really tough time for our staff, and boy, have they come out standing tall and strong in the last few months as we put new sort of procedures in place. And I think that will show itself in time. The pandemic probably got in the way of the public seeing that growth, and that I suppose that new feel that's around the place in terms of what our grassroots can deliver, what our elite high performance unit can deliver, and the international stuff, as you see. I mean, we were so impressed with what's going on in that whole international area in terms of where our underage teams are, how they're playing, that whole system that that now looks to be linked completely up to the top for the first time ever, with Stephen Kenny in the job, with Jim Crawford replacing him, with those other managers in underneath, Paul Ozam, Andy Reid, all these guys who are bringing our younger players internationally into great areas. Have a look at the rankings there if you don't believe me. Our under-21s have improved out of all recognition, and you have Stephen at the top end. So football being the key to what we all do, I just want to emphasise that point, that we were really pleased to see almost a succession plan in terms of how football is played. And without being prompted, Stephen, in his interview, which he's his own man and nobody spoke to him about what he would talk about, he mentioned that what would success look like to him. And when he said success would be our schoolboy clubs, our boys and girls around the country playing like the Irish senior team and wanting to implement their way of playing, that the hairs went up my neck when I heard that. That's exactly it. That's the process that we need to do. We need to get that in place. How do we do it? We create that identity by putting our international teams in on the one chart right the way through. And that's the exciting bit for me on the football, on the international level. The League of Ireland is going well in terms of the talks about, I suppose, regenerating how it's out there, and also the structure and the input that the clubs have. So that's going to be a game changer when we get out of this pandemic. In grassroots, we feel we really got to put an effort in there. They're reading and seeing everything in the paper going on about the league, about the Stephen Kenny, but there is work going on. But we have to prioritise that work now when we come through the pandemic and make the game great for everyone. That's the bit that really interests me, because I know the power of football and I know where that can go. On top of that, there's governance, which is not in my bag, thankfully. I suppose the corporate governance, etc., and structures of that, electoral reforms for committees. And again, it's not my piece, but there's a lot of work going on in that at the moment. And I just give you one highlight of that. People think, I think there was reports there that there wasn't a lot going on there. Our procurement office within the FAI opened this week, which effectively means every penny that's spent at the FAI must go through a procurement that eventually makes its way up to the board, that makes its way to Sport Ireland, so that when taxpayers' money is spent, we can trace it to the penny of where it's gone. That wasn't in place before, and that's a shift that in those 3 months that has happened as well. So there's lots to play for, and joining all that up and making everybody feel good about that pathway, that storybook, if you like, that says this is what the FAI is, because what it started out 3 months ago, none of us really knew what we were getting ourselves in for, those of us who came in here, but we're really encouraged, and confidence is there despite the pandemic that we'll come out of this stronger.
Yeah, and just finally, and briefly, if you don't mind, Niall, I saw some stories this morning about jamming 8 international games into a window in November, December, mixes Nations League, the playoff. I'm sure as a player you'd have been licking your lips at that, but your sense of the possibilities of that.
Sure, look, we're kind of guided by UEFA, and that's probably where we are. And yes, we believe that the European qualifying games for our 4 clubs who have qualified is the starting point, really. Then you have the international matches, which may come thick and fast, as you say, behind closed doors. Again, going back to our financial needs, that doesn't help. But it feels good to even talk about the possibility of matches taking place again. I think that's the bit that everybody, I speak to people on the phone, a lot of people in the game ring me, and everybody says the same thing: let's get it back on, let's try and get the football back on. So no matter what task is put in front of us, I mean, obviously the players come into it. I can't highlight enough the A, the safety of the players, and B, that that we don't ask them to do too much, and get them back training in time, for instance, for the clubs. I feel it's almost essential that we put everything we can into this to getting sport back up and running. And so, rather than continuously read the negative stuff and the doomsday stuff, our government has done a great job, HC have done a great job. We're itching for the go-ahead. And I think that's the bit that we have to be ready for. And as I look at the last few months, we thought we'd have been in international matches at this point now. We hoped we'd have qualified and been playing in Euros. Obviously, we don't know that outcome, and it'll all start again, but it'll get back to normal one day. But we just have to be ready when that start comes, as odd as it will be, that we do it right. And if we do it right for the tournament, for the proposed tournament for our 4 League of Ireland clubs who have qualified for Europe, if we do that right, it will all go well for about how we go ahead with the rest of the game, and not just the League of Ireland clubs of our amateur game. And then as the internationals come, that we'll have had good input already into how that might work, particularly with games at the Aviva or whatever, and we're fit and ready for them. But there's so many questions still to be answered, but we're here and we're doing what we can to do that.
Yeah, and listen, we appreciate you taking the time to chat to us this morning. Thanks a lot.
No, a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Niall Quinn on the line there, and we watch with interest, obviously, over the short term and again over the longer term as well. Plenty still to come. We've Conor, Deegan and Donal O'Neill joining us to select their down Mount Rushmore. Lots of discussion about that. We have a crappy quiz coming your way as well. But now for something completely different. Here's the official OTB AM guide to the Bundesliga.
German football is back this weekend, and we're wondering which Irish county would each Bundesliga team be. Bayern Munich is Dublin, because they've obviously both enjoyed a fair share of success over the last few years. And Thomas Muller once said that the Bayern Munich fans stand for a hardcore winning mentality with a good dose of self-belief, but without any arrogance. The same goes for Dublin fans, of course. Hill 16, a picture of humility, hugely respectful of all opponents that go by the wayside. Borussia Dortmund is Kilkenny, because obviously the black and amber, but also because the only way Erling Haaland could become a more dangerous individual is if he grew up with a hurley in his hand. The arch rivals for Kilkenny and Dortmund both wear blue, so for Schalke, step up Tipperary. It has often been said as well that Semple Stadium is every bit the engineering wonder that is the Veltins Arena. Hertha Berlin is Offaly, because apparently they've won stuff in the past. Augsburg is Roscommon, because if an Irish person went to Bavaria, they would recognise Munich, they would recognise Nuremberg, but they probably wouldn't have a clue where Augsburg is. Similarly, if a German person came to Connacht, they would recognise Galway, they would probably recognise Mayo, but they would definitely say, what the f*** is a Roscommon? Werder Bremen is Donegal. Tucked away in the northwest, they both remind their respective countries that they exist by winning a championship every couple of decades. Union Berlin is the hipster club of the Bundesliga, so let us assign it to the hipster capital of Ireland, which is Cork. So Union Berlin is Cork. Can you even get a flat white in Cork? Dusseldorf is Derry, because they both wear red and white. The only difference is that if somebody tells you to use Dusseldorf's full name, go ahead and call them Fortuna Dusseldorf. But if somebody tells you to use Derry's first name, do not follow their instructions. FC Cologne is Kerry, because both of these places have very weird obsessions with goats. Cologne's mascot is a goat. Kerry have an annual festival in honour of a goat. I just want to take this opportunity to say best wishes to Hennes the goat, Cologne's mascot, who won't be available for matchday duties this weekend due to COVID-19. We wish you all the best in your return to full practice, and you are more than welcome in Kerry at any point. Literally. We will welcome you with open arms. Freiburg is situated in the warmest part of Germany, so we can only give Freiburg to Wexford. And of course, Fourth Mountain is Wexford's very own version of the Black Forest. Paderborn is Longford, because I will give you 20 quid if you can point out both of these places on a map. Hoffenheim is Monaghan, because Hoffenheim's town has the smallest population of any team that competes in the Bundesliga. Monaghan, of course, always feel they need to be given extra credit for any victory because not a lot of people live there. To Hoffenheim and Monaghan, do you both want a medal? RB Leipzig is Galway, because as Leipzig have tried to establish themselves as a third team in the Bundesliga, Galway are always trying to establish themselves as a third city in Ireland. Also, Julian Nagelsmann looks like a young fella from the west of Ireland who just got a big job above in Dublin and is now home for Christmas with his big fancy expensive coat. Bayer Leverkusen are Mayo, because they've consistently been a top 5 team in recent years, and also that they haven't actually won the biggest championship in the last 10 years, but mostly to do with the fact that they've been really good. Actually, they haven't won anything going back throughout the 2000s or the 90s or the 80s. Mostly, but really good consistency all the same though. Mainz is Leitrim, because Mainz is one of the top 3 carnival cities in Germany. And to be honest with you, it looks like a big German version of Carrick-on-Shannon. Borussia Mönchengladbach is Kildare, because both of these places are home to some of the most impressive horses we've ever seen. In Kildare, you can find Beaver Salmon. In Kildare, you can find Hurricane Fly. In Mönchengladbach, you can find that creepy mascot called Yunter that's supposed to be a foal. Wolfsburg are Fermanagh. Are they shite? No. Are they excellent? No. Will they be out of the running for the main championship midway through the season? Yes. Eintracht Frankfurt is Meath. Both Frankfurt and Meath have a rich and royal history, and have seen battles involving kings and queens down through the centuries. In recent times, they've both been incredibly prosperous places. Frankfurt has one of the busiest commercial airports in the world and one of the busiest commercial districts in the world. Meath has Tato Park.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Thursday night football with John Giles.
Johnny Giles is a national treasure. When he speaks, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. When he's on the show, I was in the car the other day, I parked the car and I sprinted into the house and turned on the radio. I love listening to him. I love Johnny Giles.
John Giles. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
You can say it's grand. It's not grand if you're not on it, though.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
All right. You're watching OTB AM. It's 9:15 on this Friday morning. It's the moment you've all been waiting for. We're going to select County Down's Mount Rushmore. To do it, two proud sons of Down are waiting on the line. Conor, Deegan and Donal O'Neill. Good morning to you, lads.
Good morning, fellas.
Sleep well?
No.
We better get straight into it. We've had Colin Murray. I don't know if either of you managed to catch him on the show a bit earlier on, and he's made an impassioned plea for four people, but very much of the view that George Best and Rory McIlroy were bankers. Conor, you're our lead selector here. Lead us off.
Yeah, well, it was horrendous. I was sorry that I said I would do it when I started delving. when I started delving into it, and you realise just the extent and the depth with which you could do it. I could happily and easily put in 4 Gaelic men or women, quite easily, without a problem. But in the interest of some sort of balance, I tried to sort of spread it out a wee bit further. I watched Colin earlier on, and for me, quite simply, I think McIlroy's an absolute shoe-in. 4 major wins. You know, what he has done in his entire career has been outstanding.
Conor, what's the view of him up there? Because look, I think you're right, and there's no great amount of time to spend debating whether he should be on it, and that's the start. What's the the way there is a perception of him certainly down here that he's, some people love him, some people loathe him. What's the perception of the guy?
Sport-wise, yes, absolute guarantee. I think that the big issue is he loved. Not like Harrington would be loved in Dublin, or in his way that he.
Why is that?
I suppose he got embroiled with the crap that we have to deal with in the north. The politics, people look at it green or orange. I mean, there's so much crap involved with it. If you take it outside, this kid grew up in front of us. He's now 31. He's not a kid. He's a man. But he did all his growing in front of us. He was a superstar from early on. He was touted as being a superstar, and he had to do all of that in the confines of a very, very difficult bubble. No matter what he said, it was going to be scrutinised, and it was. Some of the things he said, you would question why he said them. That's another aspect of it. But I think he's hugely respected, but I don't think he's loved to the same degree. Although, I find that, personally speaking, I think that's wrong. I think that in many ways he's, his talent is unquestioned. I would know his coach reasonably well, and, that everything about them is so down to earth and basic. I think he actually wants to be just an ordinary punter, an ordinary guy, but unfortunately his skill sets and the world that he lives in and moves in doesn't allow him to be that. I think he would happily run about and play as he done and hurt his ankle and play his football and mess about. And I think that's really where his biggest issue is. The other side of it now, he's in America, he's now away from this part of the world. But in many ways, it's and like he's done tremendous things here. He's the Sunshine Charity up in Newcastle for the kids with cancer. He has put money where his mouth was as well. So, in many ways, you'd have to look at the bigger picture and say, I think he's done very well. I think he's stayed reasonably balanced. it's perception. It's what we look at and it's what we expect. We want him to stand up and say certain things because, from our side of the divide, that's what you want to call it, you want him to say certain things. And, if he doesn't say it the way you want it, then you're against him. And it's nonsense, really, when all said and done.
Yeah, like he should, Donal. He wasn't even 10 when the Good Friday Agreement was signed. He, in so many ways, should embody everything that's brilliant about the North. And it is interesting to hear that he still divides opinion.
I don't think he divides sporting opinion, and what I've tried to do in bringing my list together here is just put the bias aside. I'd have similar biases to Conor, GAA and all of that. But I think when you're talking sport and performance and how high up the mountain have they got? And McIlroy's at the top, end of story.
Yeah, there's no arguing that's for sure, Donal. We might get stuck into what way this mountain is going to look. So earlier on, Colin had George Best and Rory McIlroy, 2 absolute guarantees. So the two of you are putting down Rory McIlroy, I assume, as your number 1. Like, if we go in order of your preference, who is your number 2 down sports person, Conor?
Mine would be, it's a Gaelic man. As I said, I could have filled this with many great Gaelic people. But for me, and I'm probably not going to get an awful lot of kickback from Donal. For me, Sean O'Neill would be brought into the reckoning. I think his longevity, the class with which he played, carried himself, the passion. He played for Mitchell's Queens down in Ulster. It's only when you start seeing or listening to what he achieved. He had 3 All-Irelands, 6 All-Stars. There were 2 All-Stars as we know them, and 4 Cuchulainn Awards previous, 4 McKenna Cups, 5 Lagan Cups, 8 Ulster titles, and he played in 15 finals, which I just find mind-blowing. 8 Railway Cups, 3 National Leagues, Texaco Footballer of the Year, and he just happened to make Team of the Century and Team of the Millennium. It's as a player, I think he scored 85 goals and 500 plus points in his career. I just think from a playing point of view, it's unparalleled. I would have thought I was certainly up in this neck of the woods. As a man, his passion for his county, for his people, absolutely phenomenal. You speak to Sean O'Neill and you're the only person in the room, you're the only person at the side of the pitch. He just embraces you and talks to you directly, and his desire and love for the game is just absolutely phenomenal, So, as I said, Sean I could have put so many in there. Maurice Hayes, Kevin Musson, Mickey Linden, so many fellas that Colin McIlroy, I could list them for God's sake. But
what sort of a player was he, Conor? Is that? I mean, I don't know if it's a fair question to ask Donal, but.
It's a difficult question in many ways. I mean, Sean O'Neill played. When he finished, I was I think 4 or 5 or whatever. But his playing ability, very, very quick, thoughtful. The way he thought about football, very, very sharp, very tenacious, aggressive. Very, there was no skullduggery. It was very, very clean, very single-minded, driven. But his skill sets obviously were on a par with absolutely anything else that was going on, and he played in a forward line that early '60s team. I mean, from our county, nothing touches it. To compete in 15 finals in 16 years, which Sean did, or whatever. I think there was 2 years that he missed out. Would have been 69 and 72. Other than that, he played in every final. I just think. We talk about teams now getting to 5, 6, 7, 8 finals. He did 15, won 8. I think that's a remarkable achievement in anybody's book. But just how he carries himself, and I would put Sean O'Neill forward as a representative of the GA if that's how we want to look at it, purely because I just think what he's done. And you have other guys. You've 4 guys won 3 All-Irelands, of which he's won. I think you've Dan McCartan, Paddy Doherty, and Joe Lennon were the only others. So they're the 4 guys that have 3 All-Irelands in this neck of the woods. So, and you just have to talk to the man. He's 82 now, and he talks to you with the same verve and passion that he would have had when he was playing. So, you know, a great guy to be around. I have to say, I'm obviously very fond of the man. But he doesn't suffer fools lightly, and he'll tell you if you've made a mistake. He'll talk to you. He'll put it to you in very blunt terms. And when Sean speaks, you listen. So for me, as a representative of the GAA side of it, for me, Sean O'Neill. Maurice Hayes would have been very close. Kevin Musson would have been very close. Mickey Linden, I would be very biased towards Mickey, obviously. Again, but they're loved. I think that's something that comes out of this. I mean, Mickey Linden's absolutely idolised up here, rightly so. Sean O'Neill would be the same. You know, Kevin Musson the same. There's so many. Pete McGrath, you know, DJ, Paddy, captains. Like Kevin Musson was the first man to carry the trophy across the border. That's a huge thing up here. It's a, you know, a seminal moment of GAA folklore up here was Kevin, and I believe got off the bus and walked across the border. And that's huge. Yeah. You know, so if we're looking at firsts, you know, I think maybe Kevin's been maybe hard done by, but you know, you have to make a call on it. That's my call. Donal, that's your uncle that's going up.
Yes, and that's, as I said, I had to put my own bias aside, and Sean's an obvious pick if you're going with a GAA personality, and he is a wonderful man. One of my favourite quotes was after I scored a very fluky goal in an Ulster semi-final, a minor semi-final championship against Clonduff up at Casement Park. I was under 16 at the time, so I was just a kid running around in the corner. The ball came off the crossbar, found its way off the back of my left knee into the corner of the net somehow, and it won us the game. And Sean said to me afterwards, that was not a pretty performance, but damned effective. And that's Sean. He always had a good word, but he was and is a legend. He's a wonderful person, but I didn't put him on my list because obviously I'm a family member, and I knew Conor would bring something GAA to the table. But I looked at this from the context of, you know, who has taken things beyond the borders of Ireland, and you know, who's really risen above a system that wasn't really supporting them. So you mentioned Joe Lennon there, Conor. Obviously another great stalwart of down GAA, but Joe's nephew is actually one of the persons on my list, and that's Dermot Lennon. Dermot won the 2002 World Show Jumping Championships, and he was paraded at half-time in Croke Park the day Armagh won. He came out at half-time, and they made the reference to Joe and whatnot, and he got a big round of applause. But that achievement was never really acknowledged. Dermot's a very calm, laid-back individual. He's not somebody who seeks the limelight. But what he achieved, and I saw it firsthand, the respect that there was for him in the world equestrian community, because I managed him for a short while. And to a man and a woman, anybody I met, I didn't really know the sport. They said there's no doubt that Dermot Lennon is the best jockey in the world right now. And to win that title, he was on a horse called Escalgo. And Dermot didn't come from money, so he wasn't buying the big horses. You know, he had one great horse, and he had one phenomenal day. But it wasn't because of his horse, because the format required you to ride the other riders' horses as well. You were given 2 minutes to familiarise yourself with your opponent's horse. There were 4 in total. And you then had to ride that horse. So it was regarded as one of the purest forms of a sporting contest that you could get. It's like Formula One drivers driving each other's car. You don't see it. And I didn't know that. So if I'm putting my biases aside, I would introduce Dermot Lennon as a candidate for this list on that basis. Okay. A quiet, unspoken hero, but a world champion.
For people who are just tuning into Mount Rushmore for the first time, Conor is going to put forward his 4, and then Donal is going to have the opportunity to swipe one of those out there. You can reach some consensus maybe on who that would be, and then obviously, Donal, you get to decide which one you are putting up there. So on the ones that our Chisler has begun to get stuck into, we've Rory is up there, and Sean O'Neill is up there so far. Our lead judicator, where are you going next?
And unlike what Collie said earlier on, I'm not on drugs, and I don't need to be drug tested. I know he wanted George Best, and I left George Best out. People
why?
Were saying, why? Because I knew somebody else would bring him in, if I'm being honest. And for a long time, I have to be blunt, I didn't realise he was a down man either.
Right.
Yeah.
So he, and Collie articulated very well, Craigie Road, you know, my part of the world is I'm from a Gaelic background. You know, there's not much Gaelic played in the Craigie Road. I wasn't aware that he was a downman until we started doing a bit of digging, and then you have to go into Google Maps and you're starting to work everything backwards as a player. But he's not on mine. I'm sure somebody else will bring it in.
Well, can we just establish right before we leave here then? So he's not on yours, but you're doing that in the assumption that he is going to be up there. So, like, are we deciding collectively here that we're not leaving this list unless George Best is on the mountain?
We've got absolutely played by Conor Deegan here. He knows exactly how the format works, and he knows that there can be one alteration made to his Mount Rushmore, and that will have to be George Best. So you've played us perfectly here, Conor.
It's all a political game, boys. We're very political up this neck of the woods. You better know that at this stage.
We better get Donal in, though. We better get Donal's thoughts on George Best.
I have to confess, I'm with Conor. There are a lot of elastic borders between Down Armagh, Antrim and whatnot, and it's hard to know where they begin and end. So I wasn't 100% sure if Best was from Down. I just assumed Belfast, and I didn't want to go there, and I thought Conor would have him. So this is a bit of game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. I thought Conor would have had him, so I didn't. I mean, Pat Jennings is the legend from Newry that we would have grown up with. But I think if George is absolutely a down man, then he's absolutely on my list, because if Pele said he was the greatest, what are we doing here debating whether he was or he wasn't?
I'm beginning my temperature's beginning to lower with that comment, Donal. So good. Right, and on that basis, we'll come back to it before. We've about 8 minutes to get through this, so we will come back to that before we wrap. But where are you taking us next, Conor?
I'm taking to a wee lassie from Portaferry, a young lassie called Ciara McGain. It's only, again, when you start doing a little bit of digging, you realise just what this young girl has done. She went away, she raced Euro Juniors, silver medal, World Juniors, silver medal, World Youths, silver medal, Euro indoors, 1500 metre, bronze medal, European Championship, 1500 metres bronze medal. I mean, this lassie, coming from Portaferry, she wouldn't have any tracks that neck of the woods. There's nothing to help her other than her own desires. It's a hugely individualised sport. She comes across brilliantly, obviously. She's what she's done in the running world, I believe, is absolutely superb. To be competing at world and European levels is just incredible. Considering she's gone up against an awful lot of runners, the East Africans, massive amount. I think in her World Championship, the World Juniors, she was the non-East African athlete who won a medal. She won a silver medal. I think to come from her background, camogie player, it's not as if she was grown up and nurtured for stardom in the athletics track. She wasn't. So she's come from her dad under big hurling man for Down as well. She just has that drive from within, and to be able to push herself on an individual basis in a sport like that. Now, she spoke very heavily out against the drug element potentially and the doping element of it as well. Like, she ran a time that she hasn't broken the 4-minute barrier, which she really wants to do. She's just over a second behind Sonia O'Sullivan's all-time record. The time that she ran in I think it was the Europeans, she would have won a gold medal in 7 out of the previous 8 meetings with her time. But how things have developed, I think that the winner of that was coached by Mr. Salazar and things of that nature. So a lot of questions over this. I just think as how she's carried herself, what she's done, absolutely superb.
Okay, that's Rory, Sean O'Neill and Ciara McGain. Who's your fourth pick?
I went for big Newry man, Pat Jennings. Any number, Danny Blanchflower. I was okay because my dad's a Spurs man, so Danny Blanchflower, Pat Jennings, I was sort of covering bases there. Pat Jennings, his career is phenomenal. As Donal said, he's been outstanding and one of the great men that we grew up looking at and watching. He played. I think he only took up soccer really when he was 16 or so. They put him in nets for Newry Town. I think as Collie alluded to, they lost all their goalkeepers. They got this kid in. He did nets. He just happened to be very good at it. He went to Spurs for 27 grand in 1964. Played for 13 years, 591 appearances. He's won an FA Cup, 2 League Cups and a UEFA Cup with Spurs. Then they reckon he was too old and they sold him to Arsenal, where he went to Arsenal and played for 8 more years. Again, winning an FA Cup and a Cup Winners' Cup. He had 327 appearances. First man in English football to have over 1,000 appearances. He was Footballer of the Year for the Writers Association, PFA Player of the Year as well. He's held in such high esteem. He was without doubt, he was without doubt one of the top 2-3 goalkeepers on the planet. Played in 6 World Cup campaigns. His final match was in the 86. He was 41 years of age, and his final match was in a World Cup finals. A more humble, decent human being you will never meet. Possibly the worst hairstyle in Europe, which is saying something coming from myself, who I'm sort of follically challenged. But as a man, I met him actually not that long ago, I suppose about a year ago, and just, he hasn't changed. He's just the guy from Newry. Yeah. He's done very well and has time for everybody. And look, when you look at what he's done, superb. Very hard to go against him. But, somebody's going to lose out somewhere.
Yeah, and look, I know, Donal, you're in agreement with Pat Jennings. You've Rory up there, as you mentioned. You mentioned Dermot Lennon. Give us your fourth and let us know exactly what we're dealing with now.
I'll give you my fourth in a second, but I'm delighted Conor brought in an athlete, because when Tommy called me the other day, I said, I bet you haven't got some remarkable track and field athletes on this list who should be. And I was a senior international athlete for a blink of an eye. Terry McHugh was captain of that squad. Terry McHugh, born in Clonmel, couldn't hurl. That's why people never heard of him. Made 6 Olympics, 4 Summer Olympics, 2 Winter Olympics, 21 consecutive javelin titles, world-class athlete, an absolute monster. The first time I saw him was down in Santry Stadium. I walked onto the high jump fan. I was 16 years old. There's this bloke, 6'4", 110 kilos, knocking out the javelin with handstand push-ups in between. And this was long before CrossFit, boys. Remarkable athlete. And to make a toboggan Olympics, I can't tell you how phenomenal achievement that is. You've got Adrian O'Dwyer down in Kilkenny, who was the first Irish athlete ever to be ranked indoor. He jumped 2 meters 30. He was second in the world to Kobe Bryant in the vertical leap stats. Kobe did 121. Adrian did 120. Nobody's heard of Adrian O'Dwyer. Remarkable world-class athlete who had a brief career, but a very brilliant career. And Maeve Kyle, my coach, Adrian's coach, first woman to compete for Ireland in the Olympics in 1956. Captain of the Irish hockey team, took up athletics at 27, made 3 Olympic Games. So there's a lot of bias out there. So I'm delighted Kieran McGeehan's on Conor's list. On mine, I've got Norman Brown. In 1982, I was nominated alongside my cousin wee James McCartan for the Junior Sports Personality Awards in Newry and Mourne, which was a small little event in the town hall. I think Norman Brown won it that year. Norman had won the TT, the Isle of Man TT, on his debut race. He was very sadly killed at the British GP the following year in Silverstone. And Northern Ireland is a it's a petrol head centric part of the world. A lot of people don't realise that if you're not in it. But I went to the MotoGP in Italy last year just to see what it was like, and it gave me a whole new respect for these racers. And in fact, Steve Hislop, who went on to win the TT 11 times, said that Norman Brown was the greatest racer he ever saw. And if Norman hadn't been taken away so tragically, he would have wiped myself and Joey Dunlop into the weeds, quote unquote. So a remarkable talent who had burst onto the world stage and then disappeared, and people have obviously forgotten about him. So Norman Brown made my list for that reason, and he is from Newry originally, my hometown.
Okay, right. So we've a fairly stellar list of 8, and just to recap it for people, and we've a little bit of extra time here. Conor's gone for Rory McIlroy, Sean O'Neill, Kieran McGeehan and Pat Jennings. And Donal, you've mentioned Norman Brown there, Dermot Lennon a bit earlier, and also Pat Jennings and Rory as well. Now, the name that's absent, and we're going to have to find a way of getting him on here, Whichever one he is going to have to give, I don't know. But how are we making room for George Best?
No idea. Over to you, Donal. You're the one meant to take one out.
Mine was a geographical error, you know. So I would, and you know, I remember going to meet Pat Jennings, who was a great friend of my uncle's, and I actually hid under a mattress in the garden. I was literally shaking in my boots with the prospect of meeting this giant of a man. So there's no argument that Pat is a remarkable person, a phenomenal sportsman. But I remember watching a show where they put Kevin Keegan up against George Best, and you know the vote came down 10-1 in Keegan's favour because he was a team player and he was this and he was that. But I'm sorry, you know, if Pele says he's number one, he's number one. So anything else is a waste of breath. And I was just unsure about the geography, so that fails on me. Otherwise, he would have been on my list.
Yeah,
I think one of the biggest issues we have, it's the numbers, it's the people. You have Eddie Irvine.
Yeah.
You know, second in the World Championship, 4 Grand Prix wins, 28 podiums. You know, phenomenal stuff. You know, wee lassie who's lives very close to myself, Bethany Firth, Paralympian, 4-time Olympic gold medalist in the 1 and 200 meters swimming. You know, obviously she comes into the reckoning. To do that, she swam for Ireland first, and then obviously the sort of the British realised she was very good, so they took her across to swim for them. There's a few, like Philip Matthews, rugby, from Ballywalter. Played for Queen's, George Wander, Ulster, Ireland. I think he also played in the Lions. Phenomenal. Danny Blanchflower, spoken about. Unbelievable. There's a wee man named a boxer, Jimmy McLarnin. Nobody knows who Jimmy McLarnin because he was born in 1907.
You're avoiding the issue here, Conor.
No. You're the one who has to make the call. I'm okay.
Richard Dunwoody, nobody's mentioned.
Richard Dunwoody. 3-time champion, 5-time jump jockey. He was of the year. Over 1,800 winners. Now, I'm not a big horsey fan. I'm not a fan. I don't know enough about it to argue, but he was 3-time jump jockey. There's learned friends of mine who are horsey people, and they said like he wasn't given all the top rights. So for him to do what he did was absolutely off the scale. No Connolly, he put him forward as his choice, or one of his choices.
He did, yeah.
When you start looking at them sort of things, but for me, the best thing is sitting there. That's the problem.
Are you saying with your 4 now? Donal is right. We need to pin you to it here. Are you saying with your 4 you're not moving?
I have my 4. Somebody has to take one out, and it's not me has to take one out. It's Donal has to take one out. Is that not how this is meant to work?
I'm going to have to trade Big Pat. I'm going to have to put Best in there. I'm sorry.
So you're putting George Best in as of your own volition, so rather than one of the other ones you've mentioned. So that changes things considerably. So George Best in for Pat Jennings, which means we're currently sitting on a Mount Rushmore of Rory McIlroy, Sean O'Neill, Ciara McGeehan and George Best.
Oh, apologies. I was thinking within sporting codes. I would trade Ciara McGeehan, unfortunately,
for George Best and keep Pat Jennings on the mountain.
Yes.
I see. Right. So that's so just to recap that then, it's Rory McIlroy, Sean O'Neill, Pat Jennings and George Best, which is where we're currently at, Adrian. And this is a complicated renewal of Mount Rushmore, I think it's fair to say.
That is an unbelievable list, lads. Like that's
well, the beautiful thing, unlike the Meath fellas, we're not talking jawlines here. Tommy was talking about wonderful jawlines, and Hector was eulogizing about the beauty of Graham Geraghty's backside. We're above that. We have transcended that.
Listen, George Best, I'm sure had lovely arse as well, but he deserves to be up there.
Lads, George Best, a couple of greatest throwaway quips of all time. Man, look, he says I used to go missing quite a bit. Miss UK, Miss Canada, Miss America. He was a boyo,
He was a rogue, wasn't he? Like in terms of the transcendent aspect of things, Conor has been a massive part of this entire debate over the last couple of months. But like when you talk about transcendent characters on the island, they probably don't come any bigger than him.
As a footballer, no. I mean, as a footballer, as Donal has said, I mean, to put for players like Pele or any of these to talk about best in the same breath, it shows you where you're at as a player. You know, there was a piece done on him, and it's a great line, and it was fleeting but eternal brilliance of George Best as a footballer. You know, and that's that from that point of view. It's when you read through it, you just see the demise, and you're just saying, what an awful. Yes, the brilliance was there, but it was the you know, he played for 11 different clubs. He became a journeyman, which was so sad, you know, and you start, you know, European Cup winner in 1968. I think he was man of the match also. Won the league a couple of times, European Footballer of the Year in 68. Hall of Famer, player of the year. I mean, it's just, you know, obviously me not wanting to include, that's not wanting to include him, but thinking that somebody else would bring him in. I understand the difficulty I had was, you know, he's never been referred to as a down man. He's always been referred to as George Best from Belfast. You know, geographically, yes, he falls within the parameters of down, so he's a down man.
Listen, the gods have smiled kindly on Conor. Take the gift when it's coming your way. Isn't it amazing, Donal, the like conversation that we're having here about like the almost unfulfilled aspect of him and the tragedy that comes with the association with the name?
Well, I mean, is it or isn't? I mean, I'm a filmmaker by profession, and George Best's story is it's fairy tale stuff, and yeah, you've got a tragic ending, but don't remember the ending. Remember the movie. I mean, that's what I would say. And you know, Best made his own decisions. They were different times. In the modern era, it would have been very, very different. But we were fortunate that he came from Belfast, and you know, the airport's named after him. And I just can't get past the fact that Pele bowed down to George Best from Belfast. It's absolutely remarkable. And perhaps, you know, the further away we get from Bestie's era, it's not the better he becomes, but you know, the bigger the memory and the longer his shadow, because I don't think his memory will ever fade. He's that big a deal.
Remember me for the football was one of his famous quotes that gets obviously put out quite a bit. So I think we're at our final four here, on, and I don't think there's any great rancour about it. I think are we all happy to sign off on those four?
Well, like from a place where all the cards were in the air about 10 minutes ago, everything has kind of come together nicely. I think there was just a wider appreciation. We should probably hear Colin Murray's final pitch. Like, this was supposed to be to persuade one of you guys to change your mind and put George Best in, but I think you've already done that. But let's listen to it anyway. Here's Colin Murray from earlier in the show.
That's really difficult, because part of me wants to say Danny Blanchflower, but I think Richard Dunwoody's probably going to get lost in the whole conversation. 3 times a champion jockey. So I think I will. Oh my God, my heart's racing. Who would have thought a make-believe mountain and down could do this to me? And again, you see Blanchflower and Jennings. A lot of people put Jennings above Blanchflower. So, oh my goodness, that's really, really difficult. I'm looking at the mountain now. Say McIlroy's there. Say Best is there. Would it be weird to not have Jennings or Blanchflower up there? Not really, because, well, you can't compare apples and oranges, right? Sport. I'll go Richard Dunwoody.
I think that's a serious shout. Yeah. I think your point earlier on about it being a bit of a shootout between Richard Dunwoody and maybe Pete McGrath or Sean O'Neill from the GA side is bang on. I think that it'll come down to small margins between them.
Let's do that, and let's do that. Who would have thought that? Who would have thought Dunwoody would have been the last name on my lips?
There you go. So he actually wanted to put Dunwoody on it, but I think you guys have almost played the game here in a situation where George Best automatically had to become his wild card and his final pitch that he's actually altered. I actually just wanted to ask you, Donal, about Sean O'Neill, because we didn't get into it with you actually in too much detail earlier on, and obviously he was always going to be on your Mount Rushmore, but I think for every Down GAA person he's in consideration, and obviously Conor's the man who put him up here in the first place. Can you sum up what this team in particular means to the people of Down and the GAA people of Down?
Well, Tony Hanaho, the great Dublin player, he probably told me one of the great stories about that day in 1960 when Down took Sam Maguire home for the first time over the border. And Hanaho was 9 or 10 years of age. He said he was up in the stand. My father met the Uachtaráin at that time, several years later, and he said to him, he said, Kevin, there were 119,000 in Croke Park that day. We couldn't tell anybody. But Tony Hanaho told me, he said it was like a concert. They were all spilling down onto the pitch. And they were passing bodies down onto the sideline as they fainted. So it was a scene that the GAA had never seen before. And speaking to people from that era who remember it, we had the GPA office above Kennedy's pub there near Croke Park. And, they told me in there that when the Down team came in, it was like Man United coming in. They were this flash of colour, something that was new and fresh and exciting, and it just turned a page. And of course, I have no concept of that, only from what people tell me. But, my dad was on that team as well, and it just strikes me that it was one of those moments in time when the sport changed, and that changed the perception of ourselves in County Down. And to this day, when Down get on any type of a run, it doesn't matter who's playing, who's managing them, whatever, they will always put the fear of God into other counties, Kerry in particular. And there's a reason for that, and that's because of 1960. And obviously Sean was one of the key people in that victory.
Yeah, I think we're reaching and have reached consensus. I mean, I know Colin was obviously making a bit of a play there for Richard Dunwoody. Any last changes, lads?
No, I mean, I'm happy with that, and I know Dunwoody is up there, but I still feel, Dermot Lennon got a raw deal. I think when people understand the environment he came from and what he achieved, that they are two phenomenal jockeys who really rode to the top of their game. So, I mean, we need a bigger mountain, lads, or we need the mountains of Mount Rushmore, because there's too many.
To be fair, that comes up every single time, and normally I go, here, but actually you really have a case. It's an incredible list that's the envy of the entire country, that has caused rancor, debate, fallings out. And that's just between myself and Eoin this week.
But you have no idea the crap this has caused. In a good way. It's been fantastic. But it has been, honest to God, for 4 days now, it's been horrendous. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning. The first thing I was thinking about this morning was this bloody thing here. It woke me
Well,
up.
Conor, I got a message from one of your old teammates, and he said to me, don't let that bollocks put himself up there.
There's many things I would do, but I certainly would. No, Jesus, not at all. I was a water carrier. Them boys were footballers. They had, again, Pete McGrath, Maurice Hayes, Kevin Musson, Mickey Linden, James McCartan, DJ, Paddy. There's so many that we could have gone with, absolutely, and that's purely obviously the Gaelic background. Colley brought in all the soccer players that potentially could have gone forward. I think what we've done is
mention Ronan Rafferty either. I mean,
Rafferty wasn't former European number one. I mean, you're talking about Rory McIlroy, the best golfer in the world. Well, just on his day, peerless, absolutely peerless. When he plays well, he wins. Period. Or he puts a wee bit better, he wins, period. That's it. He's won majors by 8 shots. He's done things that nobody else has done.
I was saying earlier on to Colin Murray that Down had achieved very well per capita and stuff like that. It's just pure ignorance on my part. It's the fourth most populous county on the island of Ireland, and 500,000 people there. I thought this was a massive overachievement. It's about the going rate for a county the size of Down having an ability to fill 2 or 3 Mount Rushmores.
We're lifted up quite heavily because of Belfast. We're sort of anchored to Belfast, so that bucks us up. You want to drive up here, there's a few villages you drive through now. There's not too many people about. But no, look, if you throw in, obviously you're going to put in, Bass goes in, he's revered. Who else have we got? A big Pat.
We've got the final four that we've landed on are George Best, Rory McIlroy, Sean O'Neill, and Pat Jennings.
Good list, folks.
Incredible.
It's not bad. Big Pat, one of the greatest. Sean O'Neill, one of the greatest, but he represents so many of the greats that are up here.
Well, listen,
in the GAA field.
Conor and Donal, you've done your county a great service, and thanks a million for joining us this morning. It's a bloody good-looking mountain.
The rest of you're in trouble now.
We're all in trouble. It's true.
Beat that.
Thanks, lads. Fair play. Good work.
Thank you.
Donal O'Neill and Conor Deegan there on the line. That is County Down in the books. Up next, Nathan Murphy was joined by Ipswich Town's Alan Judge, Newport County's Padraig Ammond, and Hibernian's Darrell Horgan. And here is Horgan on the possibility of play returning.
I wouldn't say it's too big a stress at the minute. I'm still quite early in it to try to figure out what's going on. Obviously, there's people who are a lot smarter than I am. You're looking into it and things like that. But, for me personally, obviously, I want to get back. But then you're looking at, everything that has been said. Is it possible? Is it viable? Does it need to be a cure to it before we can possibly get back? You just don't know. If it comes to it and they say it's going to be safe and you can train, you can do this, it's safe, fantastic. But at the same time, even the Premier Leagues, you're saying that players will be kept away from their families. Is that really fair to keep a player away from his family for 3-4 weeks? Like, some fellas could be, foreign lads over. They might just be them. They mightn't have friends. They might have family that they can, I suppose they can't see them anyway, but that can speak to. That they can speak to, and they might be very lonely for them. It's a tough time for everybody. But if they were to take someone's argument, like for me, I've the two kids and the missus here. They have no one else in Scotland, so if I'm just to go away, it'd be very, very difficult for her and the two of them. So you have to think of that as well. It's not exactly fair on the families just to say, all right, people need football, ship them off for 3 weeks, everyone else will be fine.
Darrell Horgan there, great stuff on last night's football show. The full piece available now on YouTube, and head on to offtheball.com as well for all the best lines from that. Loads of reaction, Adrian, to the down Mount Rushmore, as you can imagine. People asking, was James McCartan a better player than Sean O'Neill? Somebody else, this is the same commenter actually, Music Man, saying I'd never heard of Sean, but I respect the shout. Flat jockey John Reid is mentioned. Danny Blanchflower gets a lot of love here as well. A person of the profile and the legacy of Danny Blanchflower to not really kind of come close to the two lads Mount Rushmore is really saying something for the strength of the field. Music Man again says, I know he was a rocket, but I can't believe Colin Murray didn't mention Alex Higgins. And I think Rory is loved by Northern Ireland folk. He's a great ambassador for the country, he says as well.
He's not from down though, Alex Higgins. That
is the big issue there, of course.
That's the difficulty. I think it's interesting that obviously all of Colin, Donal and Conor were accepting that they obviously come in with political biases, if that's the correct terminology, that exists. And so Colin's list was very heavily weighted inside of soccer players, obviously. It looked like Mickey Linden was going up at some point this week, and I watched a highlights reel of him yesterday. There's a guy you could spend a bit of time speaking about, but what an incredible player. One of these guys, good off left and right, sort of out in front of the ball, turn a man, made it look so easy. And knocking over scores for fun, but it brought me to look at where he sat then in the overall contingent of down players and Ulster footballers, and to be fair in terms of stats, Sean O'Neill just leaves him in the halfpenny place. He's one of the highest scoring Ulster footballers of all time, and an incredibly long career. I had no appreciation of the style or the personality of the man, and you get those things endorsed from the two lads earlier on, and it becomes a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd imagine for people from County Down who are of a nostalgic disposition during this lockdown, not having anybody from the 91 or 94 teams is probably going to be a bit gut-wrenching for them. But as you say, it's really, really hard to actually make an argument against Sean O'Neill. It was clearly the best down team they've ever had. It's just so hard when they're in that very sweet spot of nostalgia at the moment, in and around the 25 to 30 year mark. and they were just unbelievable teams as well. And so what an era for football. Whenever we talk about these teams, you get that kind of pang of wistfulness when you hear Tommy's Mount Rushmore on Monday, certainly when it comes to Meath. The same goes for this Down team. Just truly great teams. We got it a little bit as well with the Donegal teams. The 90s basically just haven't got much of a look in outside of the GEA when it comes to these Mount Rushmores so far, and that was certainly the case again today. Adrian, good stuff. As always, what is the big plans for the weekend since the tables have been turned here for the first time, like ever? I get to ask you that question.
Yeah. Big plans for the weekend is that I've been doing a lot of gardening I've been like every other middle-aged person doing a lot of gardening over the last couple of months, and we've a front and a back garden. They're both particularly tiny, but they were a bit like construction sites, so I've been getting stuck into that, and it's very slow progress, and I'm absolutely happy with that. A neighbour, I think I told you a few weeks ago, gave me a lend of a rotavator, which allowed me to make great progress. Another neighbour is now giving me a sieve, so I can get the stones out of it without breaking my back, and I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to doing a lot of that over the weekend. It's sad. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and sorry, you're not planting. I was hoping you were going to tell us about the vegetables that you're planting, but obviously that's something for another day.
Stones out on, and then I'll tell you about the vegetables in a couple of months.
Should mention we're on Virgin Media Sport tomorrow night with our classic game club, Juventus against Manchester United, 1999, the second leg of that epic in Turin. You don't want to miss that. It's at 6 o'clock on Virgin Media Sport. We are done here on OTB AM, back on YouTube, on Facebook, on Periscope on Monday morning from 7:30. We'll chat to you then. Bye-bye for now.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.